The candles on my 28th birthday cake flickered as my mother leaned close, her voice dripping with accusation. "You're jealous of your brother," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words hit me harder than any slap. 3 years of paying her rent, utilities, groceries, and credit card bills flashed through my mind. Jake sat across from me, smirking while I'd been supporting our entire family. "Then let him pay your bills," I snapped back, already reaching for my phone. I stormed out of Romano's Italian restaurant, leaving behind the half-eaten birthday cake and my family's shocked expressions. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my car keys in the parking lot. The cool October evening air did nothing to calm the fire burning in my chest. Marcus caught up with me as I reached my Honda Accord. "Shelley, wait. What just happened in there?" I couldn't even look at him. 3 years. 3 entire years of sacrificing my own financial stability, and for what? So Jake could sit there with his designer shirt and expensive watch acting like he was some kind of successful businessman, while I scraped together every penny to keep our family afloat. "Get in," I told Marcus, my voice barely controlled. "I need to see something." The drive to my apartment complex took 12 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. My mind raced through every automatic payment, every emergency transfer, every time I'd chosen generic groceries over name brands because I was supporting 3 people on my financial analyst's salary. Once inside my one-bedroom apartment, I powered up my laptop and logged into my banking app. Marcus sat beside me on my worn couch, watching as I pulled up 3 years of financial statements. "What are you looking for?" he asked gently. "The truth," I muttered, clicking through months of transactions. The first shock came when I saw September's total, $1,400 in automatic payments to various accounts linked to my mother's address. But that was just the beginning. I opened a spreadsheet and started categorizing every payment. Mom's rent, $800 monthly. That was reasonable for a decent 2-bedroom apartment in our area. But then came the utilities. Electric bill averaging $175, gas running another $80, water and sewer at $65, internet and cable package at $120. That's $440 just for utilities, I said aloud, typing the numbers. For a 2-bedroom apartment, "My utilities here are barely $150. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "Maybe she keeps it really warm or has old appliances," I scrolled further. "Grocery deliveries from Fresh Direct, $600 monthly. $600 for one person's groceries when I spent maybe $300 for both Marcus and myself. Look at this." I pointed to another category. Car payment, $412 every month. Insurance, $180. Gas allowance, I send her $150. The credit card payments made my stomach drop. 3 different cards, minimum payments totaling $325 monthly. When had Mom gotten 3 credit cards? And why were they all maxed out if I was covering her living expenses? Emergency transfers. I continued, my voice getting shakier. $200 here for Jake's car repair. $500 there when Mom said the refrigerator broke. $300 when Jake needed help with a security deposit. Marcus grabbed a notepad and started calculating. "Shelley, this is insane. You're spending over $4,000 monthly on your family." $4,000. I stared at the number he'd written down. My monthly take-home pay was $5,200 after taxes, insurance, and my retirement contributions. I'd been living on $1,200 monthly while supporting my family with the rest. 4,000 times 36 months, I whispered, doing the math. $144,000. The silence in my apartment was deafening. $144,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a brand new car. That was financial security I'd given away without even realizing the total cost. I clicked through more statements, finding patterns I'd never noticed when payments were just automatic deductions. Jake's emergency requests always came at the beginning of the month, right after I'd sent Mom her money. Mom's grocery orders were consistently expensive, filled with organic produce and premium brands I couldn't afford for myself. When did this start? Marcus asked. I scrolled back to find the first payment, 3 years and 2 months ago, right after I got my promotion and moved to this apartment. Mom called crying about being behind on bills after Dad's death. My father had passed suddenly from a heart attack, leaving my mother alone in an apartment she'd never paid for herself. I'd stepped in temporarily, just to help her get stabilized. The temporary help had somehow become a permanent arrangement that consumed my entire financial future. Have you ever asked Jake to contribute? Marcus asked carefully. That was the question that made everything worse. Jake lived in a trendy downtown apartment with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. He drove a newer BMW and wore clothes that cost more than my monthly food budget. On social media, he portrayed himself as a successful consultant who traveled for business and dined at expensive restaurants. He always says he's between contracts or waiting for a big payment, I said bitterly, but he never looks like he's struggling. I opened Facebook on my laptop and navigated to Jake's profile. The most recent photos showed him at a baseball game with premium seats holding craft beer and wearing a team jersey that probably cost $200. Before that, pictures from a weekend ski trip to Vermont, a dinner at a steakhouse where the menu prices started at $45 per entree. This was posted last week, I showed Marcus, while I was eating ramen noodles because I'd already spent my food budget for the month. Marcus put his arm around me as the full reality hit. I'd been subsidizing Jake's lifestyle while sacrificing my own basic comfort. Every time I'd chosen the cheapest option or skipped something I wanted, I'd been enabling him to live like he was wealthy. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Happy birthday, sweetie. Sorry about earlier. You know how family dinners can get emotional. Love you. No apology for the accusation. No acknowledgement of what I had been doing for 3 years. Just a dismissive comment about family dinners getting emotional as if her public attack on my character was just a minor social hiccup. I looked at Marcus, my decision crystallizing. I'm done. I needed Jake's contact information to start making changes, but I realized I always reached him through Mom or social media. As I scrolled through his Facebook profile looking for his phone number, something caught my attention that made my blood boil even hotter. Look at this, I said to Marcus, pointing to a post from 6 months ago. The post showed Jake standing next to my mother outside her apartment building. The caption read, "Nothing makes me prouder than being able to take care of my mom. Family comes first, and I'll always make sure she's comfortable and secure." Some people don't understand the responsibility that comes with being a good son, but real men step up when it matters. The post had 47 likes and dozens of comments praising Jake as an amazing son. Our Aunt Linda had written, "Your father would be so proud of the man you've become." A family friend commented, "Jake, you're such a blessing to your mother. Not many young men today take care of their parents like this." He's taking credit for everything I said, my voice rising. Look at the date. This was right after I increased my monthly support because Mom said her medical expenses went up. I scrolled further and found more posts. Jake outside a grocery store with bags of food, grocery run for Mom, making sure she has everything she needs. Another photo of him handing her what looked like cash. A little extra help for my favorite lady. Love you, Mom. The groceries I pay for, I said, pointing to the screen. The cash that comes from my emergency transfers. Marcus leaned closer. Look at the comments on this one. I read through responses from family members and friends, all praising Jake's generosity and dedication. Cousin Sarah had written, "Jake, you're such an inspiration. I hope my boys grow up to be as thoughtful as you." Mom had liked every single comment and even responded to several. I'm blessed to have such a caring son. She's been playing along with this, I realized, letting everyone believe Jake is the one supporting her. My hands shook as I took screenshots of every post. The evidence was damning. For months, Jake had been building a public reputation as the devoted son who sacrificed for family, while I'd been the actual person making the sacrifices. I found Jake's phone number in one of Mom's old texts and immediately started calling utility companies. The first was the electric company. Hello, this is Shelley Morgan. I need to remove my bank account from automatic payments on account number. I read off the account number from my banking records. One moment, please, the representative said. I see this account is in Patricia Morgan's name, but payments have been coming from your account for 36 months. Are you sure you want to discontinue service? I don't want to discontinue service. I want to remove my payment method. Patricia Morgan is an adult who can arrange her own payment method. I understand. I'll need to verify some information with you first. After 20 minutes of verification questions, the representative confirmed my bank account was removed from the electric bill. Ms. Morgan, the account holder, will need to provide a new payment method within 10 days to avoid disconnection. That's not my responsibility, I said firmly. I called the gas company next. Same process, same result. Then water and sewer, cable and internet. Each representative seemed surprised by the unusual arrangement where an adult child had been paying another adult's bills for 3 years. How common is this? I asked the cable company representative. Honestly, not very. Usually we see elderly parents on adult children's accounts, not the other way around. Are you sure about this change? Completely sure. Marcus helped me create a detailed spreadsheet tracking every payment method I removed. By 10 o'clock that evening, I'd successfully removed my information from 11 different accounts tied to my mother's address. Now for the credit cards, I said, pulling up my banking app. The first credit card company informed me that I wasn't authorized to make changes since my name wasn't on the account. However, the representative added, I can see that automatic payments from your bank account have been keeping this account current. Without those payments, the account will become delinquent within 30 days. Again, not my responsibility. But removing myself from Mom's credit card payments led to a disturbing discovery. When I logged into my bank account to verify the changes, I noticed automatic payment authorizations I didn't remember setting up. Marcus, look at this. There's an automatic payment to something called West Side Property Management, $450 monthly. I called the number associated with the payment. After being transferred twice, I reached someone who could access account information. Yes, this payment is for apartment 4B on Maple Street. The lease shows Jake Morgan as the primary tenant with Shelley Morgan listed as guarantor and emergency payment source. I never signed anything for Jake's apartment, I said, my voice rising. I'm looking at the documentation now. Your signature is on file along with your credit report and income verification. I never provided income verification for Jake's apartment. Ma'am, I can only tell you what's in our file. Would you like me to fax you copies of the signed documents? Yes, immediately. I gave them my fax number at work, realizing I'd have to explain this situation to my boss if questioned about personal faxes. Next, I called my credit card companies to check for any unauthorized automatic payments. The first representative found nothing unusual. The second found 3 automatic charges I'd never authorized a gym membership for $75 monthly, a streaming service bundle for $35, and something called premium auto services for $89 monthly. When did these automatic payments start? I asked. The gym membership began 14 months ago. The streaming bundle started 8 months ago. Premium auto services started 6 months ago. None of these were services I used. I need to dispute all 3 as unauthorized charges and remove the automatic payment authorizations. I'll start the dispute process, but I need to warn you that if these services were set up with your permission, initially removing payment could affect your credit score if the accounts become delinquent. I never authorized any of these. After hanging up, I immediately called the gym, whose name appeared on my credit card statement. They confirmed Jake Morgan had signed up for a premium membership using my credit card as a payment, claiming I was his sister who had agreed to cover the cost as a birthday gift. Did he provide any documentation of my permission? I asked. He provided your credit card information and said you'd approve the charges. The card went through, so we processed the membership. I never approved anything. This is fraud. You'll need to speak with our billing department about dispute procedures. The streaming service had a similar story. Jake had signed up for a premium package that included sports channels and movie rentals using my credit card and claiming I'd given permission as a family shared plan. Premium auto services was the most expensive and most concerning. They confirmed the service was auto detailing and minor repairs for a BMW registered to Jake Morgan at his Maple Street address. So my credit card has been paying for Jake's car maintenance for 6 months, I asked. According to our records, yes, the service agreement shows monthly detailing oil changes and minor maintenance covered under the premium plan. I hung up feeling like the room was spinning. Jake hadn't just been benefiting from my payments to Mom. He'd been directly stealing from me for months, using my credit information to fund his lifestyle while maintaining the illusion that he was financially independent. Marcus pulled me close as I started crying from sheer overwhelm. How did I not notice this? How did I let this happen? Because you trusted your family, he said quietly. That's not your fault. But it felt like my fault. I'd been so focused on helping Mom that I'd never monitored my own accounts carefully. I'd assumed the increase in my credit card bills was due to my own spending, so I'd been cutting back on personal expenses to accommodate higher payments. My phone rang. Mom's number. Shelly, what's going on? The electric company called saying our service might be shut off. I removed my payment information from your accounts. Why would you do that? How am I supposed to pay these bills? The same way every other adult pays bills, with your own money. You know I can't afford all this by myself. What about Jake? Did you call Jake? Jake can handle his own financial responsibilities too. Shelly, please don't do this. I said I was sorry about dinner. Family arguments happen. That doesn't mean you should abandon me. I'm not abandoning you. I'm stopping enabling you. What's the difference? The difference is that enabling means I do everything for you while you take credit for being responsible. Helping means I support you while you take steps toward independence. I don't understand this psychology talk. I just know my lights are going to get turned off. Then I suggest you call Jake since everyone thinks he's been taking care of you anyway. I hung up and immediately blocked Jake's number and Mom's number on my phone. I needed space to think clearly without manipulation attempts. But the evening wasn't over. My laptop chimed with a Facebook message from Jake. What's your problem? Mom's freaking out about her bills. Stop being such a selfish brat and fix this. I screenshot the message and then blocked Jake on all social media platforms. Marcus looked at me with concern. How are you feeling? Like I've been living someone else's life for 3 years, I said honestly, but also like I'm finally taking control of my own life. The next morning at work, I could barely concentrate on the quarterly financial reports I was supposed to be analyzing. Every few minutes, my mind wandered back to the previous night's revelations. I'd sent an email to my supervisor explaining that I might receive some personal faxes related to identity theft. And thankfully, she'd been understanding. By 10:30, the faxes started arriving. The first batch of documents from Westside Property Management made my stomach drop. There was indeed a signature that looked like mine on Jake's lease agreement, but I'd never seen the document before in my life. The handwriting was similar to mine, but not identical. Someone had practiced forging my signature. Along with the lease, there were copies of my credit report, my bank statements, and even a letter allegedly from me stating that I would guarantee Jake's rent payments as his emergency backup. The letter was typed with only a signature at the bottom, but it included personal information only someone close to me would know. I immediately called Westside Property Management back. I'm looking at these documents you faxed, and this signature is forged. I never signed anything related to Jake Morgan's apartment. Ma'am, if you're claiming fraud, you'll need to file a police report and provide us with documentation. Until then, you're legally responsible for the guaranteed payments. How is that possible? I never consented to this responsibility. The documents in our file show your signature and your financial information. If someone forged your signature, that's a criminal matter you'll need to pursue through law enforcement. After hanging up, I called my bank's fraud department. The representative was helpful but warned me that identity theft cases involving family members were particularly complex. The challenge is that your brother had access to your personal information legitimately as a family member, she explained. Proving he used it fraudulently rather than with implied permission can be difficult. But I never gave permission for him to sign me up as a guarantor for anything. I understand. Let's start by pulling your full credit report to see what else might be affected. She walked me through accessing my complete credit profile, and what I found was devastating. Jake had apparently been using my information as a reference or emergency contact for multiple accounts over the past 2 years. His car loan listed me as a secondary contact with a note that I'd provided income verification to help him qualify for better terms. I'd never spoken to his car dealership or provided any information. A furniture store showed me as a co-signer on a living room set purchased 8 months ago. The total amount financed was $6,700 for what the paperwork described as premium leather sectional with matching tables and entertainment center. Most concerning was a personal loan from a credit union for $12,000 taken out 4 months ago. The paperwork listed me as a co-signer and included copies of my pay stubs I'd never provided to anyone. How did he get my pay stubs? I asked the bank representative. Does he have access to your mail? Sometimes family members intercept documents. That possibility hadn't occurred to me. Jake had a key to Mom's apartment, and I'd been having some mail sent there when I moved apartments last year. He could have easily taken documents during his frequent visits. I asked the bank representative to place a fraud alert on my credit file and lock my credit reports so no new accounts could be opened without my explicit permission. We'll also need to dispute each unauthorized account individually, she explained. This process can take several months and may temporarily impact your credit score while investigations are ongoing. By lunchtime, I'd identified 7 different accounts where Jake had forged my signature or used my identity without permission. The total amount of unauthorized debt in my name was over $24,000. I called out sick for the remainder of the day and drove to the police station to file an identity theft report. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic, but warned me about the challenges of prosecuting family members. Does your brother live with you? Did he ever have legitimate access to your personal documents? Officer Martinez asked. He's had access to my mother's apartment where I sometimes receive mail, and he would have seen financial documents when we've discussed family expenses. That's going to complicate things. Defense attorneys often argue that family members had implied permission to use each other's information, especially when there's a history of financial cooperation. But I never gave him permission to forge my signature or take out loans in my name. I believe you and will definitely investigate, but I want you to understand this could be a difficult case to prosecute successfully. I left the police station feeling deflated but determined. Even if criminal prosecution was challenging, I could at least protect myself from future fraud and work on disputing the unauthorized accounts. When I got home, Marcus was waiting with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine. Figured you might need comfort food after today. As I updated him on everything I'd discovered, his expression grew increasingly serious. Shelley, this isn't just about money anymore. This is criminal fraud. Jake has been systematically stealing your identity for 2 years. I know, but proving it might be impossible since we're family. Have you thought about confronting him directly? Maybe recording the conversation if he admits to anything. That idea hadn't occurred to me, but it made sense. If Jake confessed to forging my signature or using my information without permission, I'd have evidence for both the police and the credit companies. I drafted a text message to Jake from Marcus's phone since I'd blocked Jake on my devices. This is Shelley. I need to talk to you about some financial documents. Can you meet me at Coffee Central on 5th Street tomorrow at noon? Jake responded within 10 minutes. Finally ready to apologize for your tantrum. Yeah, I'll be there. Someone needs to talk sense into you. His arrogant response actually helped confirm my decision. Jake clearly felt entitled to whatever he'd been doing and wasn't expecting any real consequences. I spent the evening researching recording laws in our state and downloading a voice recording app to my phone. As long as one party in a conversation consents to recording, it was legal. I would definitely be consenting. But before meeting Jake, I wanted to check one more thing. I called Mom's apartment building to ask about mail delivery policies. I'm Patricia Morgan's daughter, I told the building manager. I'm wondering about mail that might be delivered to her apartment, but addressed to me. Oh, you're Shelley Jake mentioned. You sometimes get mail here. Yeah, he usually picks up anything addressed to you when he visits your mom. Is that a problem? Has he been picking up my mail for a long time? Maybe 6 months or so. He said it was more convenient since he visits regularly and you live across town. 6 months. That timeline matched exactly when some of the fraudulent accounts had been opened. Jake had been intercepting my mail, accessing my financial documents, and using that information to commit identity theft. I need to redirect all my mail to my current address immediately, I told the building manager, and Jake should not have access to any mail addressed to me. No problem. You'll need to file a change of address with the post office, and I'll make a note that only Patricia can access mail for your apartment. After handling the mail situation, I felt like I was finally taking control of the chaos Jake had created. Tomorrow's confrontation would either provide the evidence I needed to clear my name or confirm that my brother was a more skilled manipulator than I'd ever imagined. Either way, I was done being a victim. I was making coffee the next morning, preparing for my confrontation with Jake, when someone started pounding on my apartment door. Aggressive, demanding knocks that made my neighbor's dog start barking. Shelley, open this door right now, Mom's voice carried through the thin walls. I looked through the peephole and saw both Mom and Jake standing in the hallway. Mom was crying, clutching a tissue, while Jake stood behind her with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face. Against my better judgment, I opened the door with the chain lock still engaged. What do you want? What I want is for my daughter to stop acting like a spoiled child and fix this mess she's created. Mom said, her voice rising. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I stopped paying bills that aren't mine. That's what I've done. Jake stepped forward. Let us in, Shelley. We need to talk about this like adults. I don't need to let anyone into my apartment. You can say whatever you want from the hallway. Mom's tears intensified. The electric company called again this morning. They're shutting off my power tomorrow unless I pay $467. $467 I don't have because my daughter decided to abandon her family over some silly birthday argument. It wasn't a silly argument. You accused me of being jealous of Jake while I've been supporting both of you for 3 years. I was upset. Mom protested. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. That doesn't mean you should destroy my life over it. Jake's expression was pure entitlement. Seriously, Shelley, you're gonna let Mom's electricity get shut off because your feelings got hurt? That's incredibly selfish. What's selfish is letting everyone believe you've been supporting Mom while I pay for everything. I do support Mom, Jake said defensively. I visit her twice a week. I help her with errands. I drive her to doctor appointments. Not everything is about money. But the money is coming from me, not you. And somehow you've managed to take credit for my financial support. Mom pulled out several pieces of paper from her purse. Speaking of money, there are some things we need to discuss. I've been trying to help manage your finances, and I think you've made some mistakes. She handed me copies of my bank statements, with different amounts highlighted in yellow marker. How did you get copies of my bank statements? I demanded. They've been mailed to my address for months, Mom said matter-of-factly. I've been keeping track of your spending to make sure you weren't getting into financial trouble. And honestly, Shelley, I'm concerned about some of your choices. I stared at the highlighted amounts. She'd marked every payment to restaurants, every purchase at Target, every time I'd bought gas or paid for parking. Normal, everyday expenses were circled with question marks written in the margins. You've been intercepting my bank statements. Not intercepting. They're addressed to my apartment, so I've been reviewing them. As your mother, I have a right to be concerned about your financial decisions. These statements should be going to my address. Why are they being mailed to your apartment? Jake shifted uncomfortably. Maybe there was a mix-up when you moved apartments last year. Mail forwarding can be confusing. But I remembered clearly providing my correct address to the bank when I'd moved. Someone had deliberately changed my mailing address without my knowledge. I never authorized my bank statements to be sent to Mom's address. Well, they're there now, Mom said dismissively, and after reviewing them, I think you've been spending too much money on unnecessary things, like this $45 charge at Olive Garden last month. That's money you could have contributed to family expenses instead of wasting on overpriced restaurant food. I had dinner at Olive Garden once in 3 months. Meanwhile, Jake posts pictures of expensive restaurants every week. Jake works hard for his money, Mom said defensively. He deserves to enjoy himself occasionally. What work? What job does Jake actually have? Jake's face flushed red. I run a consulting business. Just because I don't punch a time clock doesn't mean I don't work. What kind of consulting? Who are your clients? Business strategy, and my client relationships are confidential. Mom jumped back into the conversation before Jake could be pressed for more details. The point is, Shelley, you've been making poor financial decisions while refusing to properly support your family. These bank statements show you have money to spare, but you're choosing to be selfish with it. I looked more closely at the statements and noticed something that made my blood run cold. Several of the highlighted charges weren't mine at all. The $45 Olive Garden charge she'd mentioned was dated on a day when I'd worked late and eaten leftover pasta at home. A $67 charge at a sporting goods store was for items I'd never purchased. Mom, some of these charges aren't mine. Someone has been using my credit card without permission. Don't be ridiculous, she said quickly. You probably just forgot about those purchases. But Jake's expression had changed. He was staring at the bank statements with obvious anxiety, and I realized he'd been using my credit card information for his own purchases. Jake, have you been using my credit card? What? No, why would you even ask that? Because there are charges here for things I never bought, and you're the only person who would have access to my financial information. Mom stepped between us. Stop it, both of you. This arguing isn't solving anything. Shelley, I don't care who made what charges. I care that my electricity is getting shut off tomorrow, and you're the only person who can prevent it. No, I'm not. You're an adult. You can prevent it by paying the bill yourself. With what money? You know I'm on a fixed income. What fixed income? You're 54 years old. You're not on Social Security or disability. What fixed income? Mom hesitated, glancing at Jake before answering. I receive widow's benefits from your father's Social Security. Dad worked construction. He wasn't making enough money to leave significant Social Security benefits. How much are you actually receiving monthly? That's private financial information. Nothing about our family finances has been private. You've been reviewing my bank statements without permission, and Jake's been using my credit cards. I think I have a right to know how much money you actually have. Jake stepped closer to the door. Shelley, you're being completely unreasonable. Mom doesn't have to justify her income to you. She does if she wants me to continue supplementing it. You're not supplementing it, Mom said, her voice rising. You're fulfilling your responsibility as a daughter. Children are supposed to take care of their parents when they get older. You're 54, not 84. You're perfectly capable of working and supporting yourself. I can't work full-time because of my back problems. What back problems? You've never mentioned back problems before. I don't like to complain about my health issues. But you've never seen a doctor for back problems. You've never mentioned pain or limitations. This is the first time you've ever brought up any health issues that would prevent you from working. Mom started crying again. Why are you interrogating me like this? I'm your mother. You're supposed to trust me and help me, not cross-examine me like I'm some kind of criminal. Because nothing you're telling me is adding up. Jake claims he's supporting you, but I'm the one paying all your bills. You claim you can't work because of health problems you've never mentioned. You've been intercepting my mail and reviewing my bank statements without permission. And now there are fraudulent charges on my credit card that coincidentally match Jake's spending patterns. Jake put his hand on Mom's shoulder. Come on, Mom, let's go. Shelley's clearly not interested in helping family. She'd rather see you suffer than admit she's been selfish. I'm not being selfish. I'm protecting myself from financial fraud. Financial fraud, Mom laughed bitterly. Is that what you call helping your mother fraud? I call forging my signature fraud. I call using my credit card without permission fraud. I call changing my mailing address without my knowledge fraud. Mom's expression shifted from hurt to angry. How dare you accuse your own family of fraud? After everything we've done for you growing up, this is how you repay us. What did you do for me growing up that you didn't also do for Jake? Why am I the only one with financial responsibilities to the family? Because you're the one with the stable job and the good income, Jake said. With great privilege comes great responsibility. Then, why are you living like you have great privilege while I'm living like I have great responsibility? Because I'm building my business. I have to invest in my image and maintain professional relationships. That costs money. What business? Name one client. Name one contract. Show me one piece of evidence that your consulting business actually exists. Jake's face went red again. I don't have to prove anything to you. You do if you want me to continue financially supporting the lifestyle you're taking credit for. Mom grabbed the bank statements back from me. Fine. If you want to be stubborn and selfish, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. Family is everything, Shelley, and you're choosing money over family. I'm not choosing money over family. I'm choosing honesty over manipulation. One day you'll understand the value of family loyalty, Mom said as she turned to leave. And by then, it might be too late to fix the damage you've caused. Jake followed her but stopped and turned back to me. You know what? You were always jealous of me even when we were kids. Mom was right about that. You can't stand that I'm successful and popular while you're just a boring accountant with no life. Financial analyst, I corrected. And if you're so successful, prove it by paying Mom's electric bill yourself. Maybe I will, Jake said defiantly. Good. I hope you do. After they left, I sat on my couch with my heart racing. The confrontation had revealed even more manipulation than I'd expected. Mom had been intercepting my mail, reviewing my financial information without permission, and trying to guilt me into continuing support by claiming health problems she'd never mentioned before. Jake's defensive responses had basically confirmed he'd been using my credit card for his own purchases, and his inability to provide any concrete details about his supposed consulting business made it clear he'd been lying about his income. Most disturbing was Mom's final comment about family loyalty. She genuinely seemed to believe that I owed them financial support simply because we were related, regardless of their dishonesty or Jake's fraud. I called my bank immediately to report the unauthorized charges I'd noticed on the bank statements and request new credit cards with different numbers. I also changed my mailing address back to my own apartment and requested that all future statements be sent only to my current address. By evening, I felt emotionally drained, but more certain than ever that I'd made the right decision. My family's reaction to losing my financial support had revealed their true priorities and their complete lack of respect for my autonomy or financial well-being. Tomorrow, I would meet with Jake as planned, armed with recording equipment and a much clearer understanding of the fraud I was dealing with. But tonight, I was going to order pizza and watch movies with Marcus, using my own money for my own enjoyment, without feeling guilty about it for the first time in 3 years. My phone rang at 7:15 the next morning, jarring me awake from restless sleep filled with dreams about forged signatures and unpaid bills. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Shelley Morgan?" a professional female voice asked. "Yes, this is Shelley. This is Jennifer from Metro Electric Company. I'm calling regarding account number 74986 under Patricia Morgan's name. We show you as the emergency contact, and I wanted to inform you that disconnection is scheduled for this afternoon unless payment is received by noon today." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. I'm not the emergency contact anymore. I removed my information from that account 2 days ago. I see a note here that payment information was removed, but you're still listed as the emergency contact for notification purposes. Ms. Patricia Morgan hasn't responded to our calls, so we're following protocol by contacting you. You need to remove me as emergency contact too. I'm not responsible for Patricia Morgan's utility bills. Ma'am, I can't remove emergency contact information without written authorization from the account holder, but I can tell you that if payment isn't received today, service will be disconnected, and there's a $250 reconnection fee plus a security deposit to restore service. After hanging up, I felt a mixture of guilt and determination. Part of me wanted to call Mom and offer to help one more time, but I reminded myself that she was a capable adult who could handle her own responsibilities. At work, I struggled to focus on quarterly budget reviews while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from unknown numbers. I realized Jake must have given my number to other family members, because I was getting messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. "Aunt Linda Shelley, your mother called crying about her electricity. Can you please work this out with her?" Cousin Sarah: "I don't understand why you're being so mean to Aunt Patricia. She raised you and deserves better treatment." Uncle Mike: "Your mom needs help and you're the only one in a position to provide it. Family takes care of family." By lunch, I'd received 17 text messages from 8 different relatives, all pressuring me to resume supporting Mom. None of them offered to help with her bills themselves, but they all seemed to think I was obligated to handle the situation. The most revealing message came from my grandmother, Shelley dear. "I don't understand why you're upset about helping your mother. Jake explained that you make plenty of money and shouldn't mind sharing with family. He said you've been selfish about money lately, and your mother is suffering because of it." Jake had been actively campaigning against me, painting me as a selfish daughter who was abandoning her struggling mother. He'd apparently told the entire extended family his version of events, where he was the concerned brother trying to mediate between his reasonable mother and his unreasonable sister. At 2 o'clock, Mom called from a neighbor's phone. "Shelley, they shut off my electricity an hour ago. The apartment is already getting cold and I have no way to cook dinner or keep my medications refrigerated. Are you really going to let me suffer like this? Have you called Jake? Everyone thinks he's been supporting you anyway." "Jake's trying to help, but he's having cash flow problems with his business right now. He can't access his funds until next week." What a convenient excuse. It's not an excuse. Business finances are complicated. You wouldn't understand because you just get a regular paycheck. My regular paycheck that's been paying your bills for 3 years. Those bills you were happy to pay until you decided to throw a tantrum. Mom, I wasn't throwing a tantrum. I was responding to being publicly humiliated at my own birthday dinner. And now you're punishing me because your feelings got hurt. The conversation was going in circles, so I tried a different approach. "Mom, what happened to Dad's life insurance policy? He had a $50,000 policy through his union." Long silence. That money is complicated. What do you mean complicated? Some of it went to funeral expenses. The rest is invested. Invested where? I'd rather not discuss my financial details over the phone. You've been discussing my financial details with the entire family, but you won't tell me what happened to $50,000 in life insurance money. That's different. Your father's life insurance is private. I hung up, frustrated by her evasiveness about her own money while she demanded complete access to mine. Around 4 o'clock, my work phone rang with an internal call from reception. Shelley, there's a woman here who says she's your mother. She seems pretty upset and is asking to speak with you. My heart sank. Mom had come to my workplace, which meant she was either desperate or escalating her manipulation tactics to include public embarrassment. I found her in the lobby wearing an old winter coat and carrying a small suitcase. Her hair was unkempt and she'd obviously been crying. Several of my coworkers were watching the situation with obvious concern. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I didn't know where else to go," she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "My electricity is shut off. I have no heat and my own daughter won't help me." My face burned with embarrassment. "You can't handle personal business at my workplace." "I tried calling you, but you hung up on me. What choice do I have?" Rebecca from Human Resources approached us. "Is everything all right, Shelley? Do you need assistance?" "It's fine," I said quickly. "Mom, let's step outside." But Mom wasn't interested in privacy. My daughter makes good money working here, but she's decided to stop helping her family. I raised her as a single mother after my husband died, and now she's abandoned me in my time of need. I could feel my professional reputation crumbling as my coworkers absorbed this information. Mom was presenting herself as a victim while making me look like a heartless daughter who was financially stable enough to help but chose not to. "Mom, please, let's discuss this privately." "There's nothing private about it. You've made your position very clear. You care more about money than family." Rebecca looked at me with obvious concern. "Shelley, why don't you take the rest of the day off to handle this family situation?" I wanted to explain that Mom was manipulating this situation, but anything I said would just create more workplace drama. "Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow." Mom followed me to the parking garage, continuing her commentary about ungrateful children and family obligations. By the time we reached my car, I was seething with anger. "How dare you embarrass me at work?" I said once we were alone. "How dare you leave your mother without electricity or heat?" she shot back. "You're a 54-year-old woman. Handle your own utility bills." "With what money, Shelley? I've told you my financial situation." "No, you haven't. You've been vague about widow's benefits and mysterious about Dad's life insurance. You won't tell me how much money you actually have, but you expect complete access to mine." Mom opened her suitcase and pulled out several pieces of paper. "Fine, you want to see my financial situation here." She handed me bank statements for an account I'd never seen before. The account showed regular deposits of $1,086 monthly from Social Security survivor benefits, but it also showed something that made my blood boil. Regular deposits labeled room rental for $300, $400, and $500 monthly. Mom had been collecting over $1,000 monthly in rent from tenants while claiming she couldn't afford her bills. "You've been renting out rooms in your apartment." "I rent out my spare bedrooms to college students. It helps with expenses." "It helps with expenses. You're collecting $1,200 monthly in rental income on top of your Social Security benefits. That's over $2,300 monthly, plus the $4,000 I was sending you. The rental income isn't steady. Students' move-out rooms sit empty sometimes. According to these bank statements, you've had steady rental income for 8 months. And even if rooms were empty, sometimes your Social Security benefits alone cover your basic living expenses." Mom looked uncomfortable. "Rent money goes toward different things. I can't use it for utilities." "Why not? Money is money." The students expect certain amenities. I have to maintain the apartment to a higher standard when I'm renting rooms. I studied the bank statements more carefully and found regular cash withdrawals of $200 to $300 weekly. What are these cash withdrawals for? Regular expenses, groceries, gas, personal items. But the amounts were excessive. $800 to $1,200 monthly in cash withdrawals, plus the room rental income, plus Social Security benefits. Mom had been living on over $3,500 monthly while claiming poverty and accepting $4,000 from me. Where is all this money going? That's my private business. It became my business when you started claiming you couldn't afford basic utilities while accepting my financial support. I do need help with utilities. The rental income and Social Security don't cover everything. They absolutely do cover everything. Your rent is $800 utilities, average $400, and your documented expenses from my banking records show another $600 for groceries. That's $1,800 monthly. You're bringing in over $3,000. Mom's story was falling apart under basic math, and she knew it. But instead of admitting to the deception, she became defensive. You don't understand the costs of maintaining a rental property. There are expenses you don't see. Like what show me receipts for these invisible expenses. I don't have to justify my spending to you. You do if you want me to continue subsidizing it. Fine, if you're going to be cruel and calculating about money, I'll handle this myself. Good, that's what I've been asking you to do. Mom started walking toward the street. Don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. Where are you going? To stay with family who actually cares about me. She called a taxi and left me standing in the parking garage with her bank statements, finally understanding the scope of the deception I'd been funding. Mom hadn't been struggling financially. She'd been double-dipping collecting rental income while using my money for discretionary spending. The cash withdrawals suggested she'd been funding Jake's lifestyle, directly giving him money that originated from my bank account. I'd been unknowingly supporting two adults who were perfectly capable of supporting themselves, but chose to exploit my guilt and family loyalty instead. When I got home, Marcus was waiting with dinner and wine, but I was too angry to eat. She's been lying about everything I told him, showing him the bank statements. She has plenty of money. She's been using my payments as extra income while portraying herself as financially desperate. Marcus studied the numbers. This is worse than fraud, Shelley. This is calculated exploitation. And she embarrassed me at work today. My coworkers now think I'm a terrible daughter who abandons her struggling mother. Anyone who knows you knows that's not true. But they don't know the whole situation. They just saw a crying older woman claiming her daughter won't help her. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Congratulations. Mom's staying with Aunt Linda now because her own daughter threw her out on the street. Hope you're proud of yourself. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing folder of evidence. Jake was still playing the victim card, but I was done being manipulated by his guilt trips. Tomorrow, I would meet with him as planned, but I was no longer nervous about the confrontation. Armed with evidence of Mom's rental income and Jake's lies about his consulting business, I was ready to expose the truth about who had really been supporting whom in our family. The next day, I was finally ready for my confrontation with Jake at Coffee Central. I'd spent the morning reviewing all the evidence I'd gathered: forged signatures, unauthorized credit accounts, intercepted mail, and Mom's hidden rental income. I had my phone set to record and a folder full of documentation. But Jake never showed up. At 12:30, I received a text from an unknown number. Shelley, this is Jake. Can't meet today. Family emergency with Mom. Rain check. Family emergency. Right. More likely he was avoiding accountability for the fraud I discovered. I was driving back to my apartment when my phone rang with a call from Mom's neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. Shelley, dear, I'm calling about your mother. She's at the grocery store and there's some kind of problem with her cards. The manager asked me to call you since you're her emergency contact. I'm not her emergency contact anymore. And what kind of problem? I'm not sure, but there are police officers here now, and your mother is very upset. My stomach dropped. Police officers at a grocery store usually meant someone was suspected of theft or fraud. I drove toward Mom's usual grocery store, dreading whatever scene I was about to encounter. I found 3 police cars in the parking lot of Metro Foods, along with a small crowd of onlookers. Inside the store, I located the commotion near the customer service counter, where Mom stood arguing with a store manager while 2 officers observed. There must be some mistake, Mom was saying loudly. I've been shopping here for 3 years. I'm a good customer. The store manager, a patient-looking man in his 50s, held several credit cards. Ma'am, these cards are all declining, and the names on the cards don't match your identification. I approached the group. Excuse me, I'm Shelley Morgan. I believe this is my mother, Patricia Morgan. One of the police officers, a young woman with kind eyes, turned to me. Ms. Morgan, your mother attempted to purchase groceries with several credit cards that were declined. When she couldn't provide alternative payment, she became disruptive and refused to leave the store without her groceries. Mom spotted me and immediately shifted into victim mode. Shelley, thank goodness you're here. There's been some terrible mistake with my cards, and these people are treating me like a criminal. The store manager handed me the declined cards. These are the cards she attempted to use. I examined them and felt my blood run cold. 2 of the cards had my name on them, but were cards I'd never seen before. The 3rd was in Mom's name, but from a bank where I'd never helped her open an account. Ma'am, the officer said to me, do you recognize these credit cards? 2 of them have my name, but I didn't apply for these cards, and I've never seen them before. Are you saying these cards were obtained fraudulently? Before I could answer, Mom interrupted. Don't be ridiculous, Shelley. You probably just forgot you got them. You have so many cards. I have 2 credit cards, and I know exactly which cards they are. These aren't mine. The store manager pulled out additional documentation. She also attempted to use a debit card that was declined due to insufficient funds. When that failed, she offered to write a check, but the checking account has been closed for non-payment of fees. I stared at Mom. Your checking account is closed. There was some confusion with the bank. It's temporary. The police officer looked at me seriously. Ms. Morgan, if these credit cards with your name were obtained without your permission, you should file a report with us. Credit card fraud is a serious crime. Mom grabbed my arm. Shelley, please don't do this. It's all a misunderstanding. I was trying to help manage your credit, and there was some paperwork confusion. Help manage my credit, how? You've been so busy with work, I thought I could help by organizing your financial accounts. I may have filled out some applications wrong. You filled out credit card applications in my name without my permission. I was trying to help. The police officer stepped closer. Ma'am, applying for credit cards in someone else's name, even a family member's identity theft. That's a felony. Mom started crying. I wasn't stealing from my own daughter. I was trying to help the family budget by having more available credit. Available credit that you were using for your own purchases, I said, the pieces falling together. The store manager held up his tablet. The declined cards show recent charges at various businesses around town: restaurants, clothing stores, a nail salon, and a gas station. Mom, you've been using fake credit cards in my name to fund your lifestyle. They're not fake. They're real cards from real banks. I just made some mistakes on the applications. The second police officer, an older man with gray hair, looked at me sympathetically. Ms. Morgan. We see this unfortunately often with family identity theft. Parents or siblings apply for credit using relatives' information, thinking it's not really stealing since they're family. But it is stealing, I said, looking directly at Mom. Yes, it is. And the fact that she attempted to use these fraudulent cards for purchases makes it credit card fraud as well as identity theft. Mom's crying intensified. Shelley, please. I made a mistake. Don't let them arrest your own mother over a family misunderstanding. I felt the weight of the decision. Having mom arrested would definitely end our relationship permanently and create a huge family scandal, but she'd been systematically defrauding me for months, and without consequences, she'd probably continue. Officer, what happens if I file a report? We'd arrest her today for credit card fraud and identity theft. She'd be booked and would have to post bail. The case would go to the district attorney's office for prosecution. And if I don't file a report, then this becomes a civil matter between family members. But I should warn you that the banks and credit card companies will still investigate the fraud when you dispute the accounts. They might press charges independently. Mom looked at me desperately. Please, Shelley, I'll fix this. I'll contact the credit card companies and explain the mistake. Please don't have me arrested. A crowd of shoppers had gathered to watch the drama unfold. Several people were recording with their phones. I recognized two women from my old neighborhood who would definitely spread this story throughout the community. The store manager cleared his throat. Ms. Morgan, I need to know how you want to handle the unpaid groceries. The total is $84.37. I looked at the shopping cart full of food, premium steaks, organic vegetables, expensive wine, imported cheese, the kind of groceries I couldn't afford while I was supporting her financially. I'll pay for the groceries this time, I told the manager, but Mom, this is the last time I'm covering any of your expenses. While I paid for her groceries, Mom stood silently beside the police officers. The humiliation of being caught using fraudulent credit cards in front of neighbors and store employees was clearly devastating to her public image. After completing the transaction, I turned to the officers. I need time to think about pressing charges. Can I contact you later today? Absolutely. Here's my card. But Ms. Morgan, the officer, addressed my mother. You cannot attempt to use these credit cards again. We're confiscating them as evidence of potential fraud. Mom nodded miserably as the officers took the fake cards. As we walked to the parking lot, Mom finally spoke. I never meant for this to happen. What did you think would happen when you applied for credit cards in my name? I thought I could use them responsibly and make the payments from the rental income. I didn't expect them to decline. Because you've been spending the rental income on other things instead of making payments. Jake needed some financial help, and I thought, you thought you'd use my credit to fund Jake's lifestyle. He promised he'd help me pay back the cards once his business got established. His imaginary business that doesn't exist. We reached our cars without saying anything else. Mom looked defeated, standing beside her 12-year-old sedan with her groceries and her shattered facade. Shelley, what happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. I'm not cleaning up this mess for you. But I'm your mother. You're my mother, who committed multiple felonies against me. Being related doesn't make fraud acceptable. I drove home with my mind racing. Mom's arrest would bring closure to the financial fraud, but it would also devastate our extended family relationships. Everyone would blame me for having my own mother arrested, regardless of what she'd done to me. But enabling her behavior by refusing to press charges would just encourage more fraud and manipulation. She'd proven she was willing to destroy my credit and financial reputation to fund her own lifestyle. When I got home, Marcus took one look at my face and poured 2 glasses of wine without asking what had happened. She was using fake credit cards with my name at the grocery store, I told him. The police want to know if I'm pressing charges. Are you? I don't know. Part of me wants justice, but part of me can't stand the thought of having my own mother arrested. What does your gut tell you? I thought about the forged signatures, the intercepted mail, the lies about her income, and now credit card fraud. My gut tells me that if I don't hold her accountable, she'll just find more sophisticated ways to steal from me. Then you have your answer. I picked up the police officer's business card and dialed the number, knowing I was about to cross a line that would change my family forever. But after months of discovering lies and fraud, I was finally ready to choose my own financial security over family manipulation. Officer Martinez arrived at my apartment that evening to take my formal statement about the credit card fraud. As I signed the paperwork to press charges against Mom, my phone rang with Jake's number. "I need to take this," I told the officer. "It's my brother, and I want him to hear that I'm filing charges." I put the call on speaker and activated my recording app. "Shelly, what the hell is wrong with you?" Jake's voice was furious. "Aunt Linda called and said you had Mom arrested at a grocery store. Have you completely lost your mind?" "I had Mom arrested because she was using fraudulent credit cards with my name on them. That's called identity theft, Jake." "She wasn't stealing from you. She was trying to help manage family finances while you were being stubborn about supporting everyone." Officer Martinez raised his eyebrows at Jake's casual admission that the family expected me to support everyone financially. Jake applying for credit cards in someone else's name is a felony, even if they're family. "It's not a felony if you gave her permission." "I never gave her permission." "Well, you should have. You make plenty of money and Mom needed help. If you'd been reasonable about family responsibilities, none of this would have happened." "Family responsibilities. What are your family responsibilities, Jake?" "I help Mom in ways that don't involve money. I visit her, I help with errands, I provide emotional support, while living off money she gets from my bank account." "That's not true. I support myself through my consulting business." Officer Martinez was taking notes, clearly interested in Jake's responses. "What consulting business?" I pressed. "Name one client. Show me one contract or invoice." Long pause. "My client relationships are confidential." "That's not an answer. If you have a legitimate business, you can provide some proof without violating confidentiality." "I don't have to prove anything to you." "You do if you want me to continue financially subsidizing your lifestyle." "I don't need your subsidies. I make my own money." "Then why hasn't Mom's electricity been restored?" "You claimed you could cover her bills temporarily." Another pause. "I'm having a temporary cash flow issue." "How long has this cash flow issue been going on?" "It's complicated. The consulting business has seasonal fluctuations." Officer Martinez handed me a note. "Keep him talking. He's admitting to fraud indirectly." Jake: "I've seen evidence that you've been using my credit cards without permission. I've also seen evidence that you forged my signature on your apartment lease and several loan applications." "That's ridiculous. Why would I forge your signature?" "Because you needed my credit score and income to qualify for apartments and loans you couldn't afford on your actual income." "My credit is fine. I don't need your help with anything." "Then prove it. Show me your recent pay stubs or business income statements." "I'm not showing you private financial documents." "You've been reviewing my private financial documents for months. Fair is fair." Jake's voice was getting more agitated. "This is insane, Shelly. You're destroying our family over money. Mom is sitting in a jail cell right now because you couldn't handle a simple financial misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was systematic fraud that's been going on for months." "Fine. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth." Officer Martinez leaned forward, clearly anticipating a confession. "The truth is that you've been living like a selfish princess for 3 years, while Mom and I struggled to make ends meet. You have a stable job, a nice apartment, a boyfriend who takes you out to restaurants. Meanwhile, I've been trying to build a business from nothing, and Mom's been living on Social Security benefits that barely cover her rent." "That's not the truth, Jake. I have evidence that Mom's been collecting over $3,000 monthly in rental income plus Social Security benefits, and I have evidence that you've been unemployed for months while pretending to run a consulting business." "You don't have evidence of anything." "I have your landlord's phone number. Should I call and ask about your employment verification when you signed your lease?" "Don't call my landlord." "Why not? If you're employed and making legitimate income, what's the problem?" Because the business is new and I didn't want to complicate the lease application with complicated income documentation." "So you lied on your lease application?" I simplified the income reporting. Officer Martinez was writing rapidly, documenting Jake's admissions of fraud. Jake, how long have you been unemployed? I'm not unemployed. I'm self-employed. How long have you been without traditional employment? Very long pause, 8 months, but I've been working on building my consulting practice. What consulting practice? You can't name a single client. Because I haven't landed my first major contract yet, but I've been networking and developing my business plan. So, for 8 months, you've been living off money that ultimately came from my bank account while pretending to be a successful consultant. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You've been committing fraud for 8 months. Jake's voice cracked. I lost my job, okay? I got laid off from the marketing firm and I've been trying to find something new. But the job market is tough and I didn't want everyone to know I was struggling. Finally, some truth, but it was too little too late. So instead of admitting you needed help, you decided to steal my identity and let me subsidize your fake lifestyle. I wasn't stealing your identity. I was borrowing your credit temporarily until I got back on my feet. Borrowing without permission is stealing, Jake. Where family helps each other. Family helps each other. Family doesn't defraud each other. Officer Martinez interrupted. Mr. Morgan, I'm hearing admissions of unemployment fraud, identity theft, and credit fraud. You might want to consider speaking with an attorney before continuing this conversation. Jake's tone immediately changed when he realized a police officer was listening. Who is that? Officer Martinez with the police department. He's here taking my statement about the identity theft charges against Mom. You're recording this conversation without my permission. I live in a one-party consent state, Jake. I can record any conversation I'm part of. This is entrapment. No, this is evidence gathering, and you've provided plenty of evidence. Jake hung up abruptly. Officer Martinez looked at me with something resembling respect. That was well handled. He basically confessed to multiple forms of fraud during that conversation. What happens next? We'll add the identity theft and credit fraud charges related to your brother to the case file. If you want to press charges against him too, we can arrange for his arrest. I thought about Jake's breakdown during the phone call. Unlike Mom's calculated manipulation, Jake's fraud seemed driven by desperation and pride. He'd made terrible choices, but he'd also seemed genuinely remorseful once confronted with evidence. Can I think about pressing charges against Jake? I want to see if he's willing to make restitution and get his life together before I decide whether to involve criminal prosecution. That's your choice, but I'd recommend setting a deadline for restitution and being very clear about your expectations. Family fraud cases often escalate if the perpetrator doesn't face immediate consequences. After Officer Martinez left, I sat with Marcus and processed everything that had happened. Your brother admitted to 8 months of unemployment while living off your money, Marcus said, and he still seemed to think he was entitled to your financial support. The scariest part is that he genuinely believes his fraud was justified because we're family. Are you going to press charges against him too? I thought about the Jake I'd grown up with versus the man who'd been systematically stealing from me for months. I want to give him one chance to make this right voluntarily. If he refuses or tries to manipulate me again, then I'll have him arrested too. What does making it right look like? Full confession, complete restitution for all unauthorized charges, and genuine effort to find legitimate employment, plus staying out of my financial life permanently. And if he doesn't agree to those terms, then I'll press charges and let the legal system handle both of them. That night, I drafted an email to Jake outlining exactly what restitution would require and giving him 72 hours to respond with a plan for making amends. I was done being manipulated by family loyalty, but I was also willing to give genuine change a chance. The ball was now in Jake's court, and his response would determine whether this family crisis ended with accountability and healing or with criminal prosecutions and permanent estrangement. Within 24 hours of mom's arrest, my phone became a weapon of mass guilt deployment. Extended family members who hadn't contacted me in years suddenly felt compelled to share their opinions about my character, my family obligations, and my apparent heartlessness. The first call came from Aunt Linda at 6:30 in the morning. Shelley Marie Morgan, I cannot believe what your mother told me. You actually had your own mother arrested over money. I had my mother arrested for committing felony identity theft and credit card fraud against me. That's ridiculous. Family members can't steal from each other. You're all one family unit. Actually, family members absolutely can steal from each other. Identity theft is a crime regardless of relationships. Your mother raised you by herself after your father died. She sacrificed everything for you and Jake. And this is how you repay her. I was getting tired of the martyrdom narrative. Aunt Linda, what sacrifices did Mom make? She had life insurance money, Social Security survivor benefits, and rental income. She's been financially stable while lying to me about being broke. Money isn't everything, Shelley. Your mother gave you love and guidance and a home. Those things are worth more than any bills you might have helped with. I'm not disputing that Mom provided for us growing up, but that doesn't give her the right to commit fraud against me as an adult. It wasn't fraud, it was family financial management. Would you be okay with your children applying for credit cards in your name without your permission? Long pause. That's different. My children wouldn't do that because we have a healthy family relationship based on mutual respect and communication. The implication stung, but I recognized the manipulation tactic. Aunt Linda, did you know Jake has been unemployed for 8 months while pretending to run a successful business? Jake's employment status is none of my business. It became your business when you started lecturing me about family financial obligations. Jake's been living off money I sent to Mom while posting on social media about being a successful consultant. Jake is going through a difficult transition period. The economy is tough and good jobs are hard to find. Then why didn't he just tell the truth instead of committing fraud? Because he knew judgmental people would criticize him for being unemployed. I wouldn't have criticized him for being unemployed. I would have criticized him for lying about it while stealing my money. Aunt Linda's tone shifted from lecturing to threatening. Shelley, if you don't drop these charges against your mother and fix this family crisis, you're gonna lose everyone who matters to you. Your entire family is disgusted by your behavior. My entire family, or just the family members who expect me to financially support everyone else. Don't be smart with me, young lady. I've been talking to your cousins, your grandparents, and your uncles. Everyone agrees that you're being selfish and vindictive. After hanging up with Aunt Linda, the calls continued throughout the day. Uncle Mike called during my lunch break. Your Aunt Linda told me what happened with your mother. I can't say I'm surprised, though. Surprised by what? You always were the most stubborn of Patricia's children. Even as a little girl, you had to have everything your way. Uncle Mike, my mother committed multiple felonies against me. This isn't about being stubborn. Look, I don't know the details of your financial arrangements, and frankly, I don't care. What I care about is that a woman in her 50s is sitting in jail because her daughter chose money over family. She's in jail because she chose to commit crimes. She's in jail because you pressed charges instead of handling this privately like a mature adult. How should I have handled credit card fraud privately? By sitting down with your mother and working out a payment plan. By being understanding about family financial stress, by remembering that she's getting older and might not understand all these complicated financial regulations. She understood them well enough to forge my signature on multiple applications. Uncle Mike sighed heavily. Shelley, I'm going to tell you something and I want you to really listen. Your mother has been bragging about your financial success for 3 years. She tells everyone how well you're doing, how you can afford to help family, how you've never had to struggle like the rest of us. I have been struggling. I've been living paycheck to paycheck while supporting 2 other adults. That's not how she tells it. According to your mother, you make so much money that helping the family is easy for you. She says you live comfortably and still have plenty left over for family contributions. That's completely false. Maybe it is, but that's what she believes, and that's what Jake believes too. They both think you've been holding back money that you could easily share. Why would they think that? Because you never told them you were struggling. You just quietly paid the bills and never complained, so they assumed you were financially comfortable. This revelation was staggering. My family had interpreted my responsible bill paying as evidence that I was wealthy enough to afford supporting them indefinitely. Uncle Mike, I was paying $4,000 monthly to support Mom and Jake. That was most of my income. $4,000 monthly? That can't be right. I have 3 years of bank statements proving it. If you were really paying that much, why didn't you ever say anything? Because I thought I was helping during a temporary crisis. I didn't realize it had become permanent. Well, your mother doesn't see it as $4,000 monthly. She sees it as help with rent and utilities and occasional groceries. Occasional groceries? I was paying $600 monthly for her food delivery. $600 for groceries for one person. Plus Jake's emergency requests, which averaged another $500 monthly. Uncle Mike was quiet for a long moment. Shelley, if those numbers are accurate, then I owe you an apology, but I'm still not sure criminal charges were the right response. What would have been the right response to identity theft? Family counseling, mediation, setting up a formal budget and payment plan. You can't budget your way out of felony fraud, Uncle Mike. The most painful call came from my grandmother that evening. Shelley, dear, I'm very disappointed in you. Hi, Grandma. I've been hearing terrible things about how you've treated your mother. I never thought I'd see the day when one of my granddaughters would have her own mother arrested. Grandma, did anyone explain to you what Mom actually did? Your mother made some mistakes with paperwork, nothing that couldn't be fixed with patience and understanding. She applied for multiple credit cards in my name without my permission and used them for months. That's not a paperwork mistake. Well, maybe she thought you wouldn't mind since you've been helping with bills anyway. Would you mind if I applied for credit cards in your name? That's different, dear. Your mother raised you. She has a right to expect help from her children. She has a right to ask for help. She doesn't have a right to steal my identity. Oh, Shelley, you're being so dramatic about this. Your mother loves you, and everything she did was because she was trying to manage a difficult financial situation. Grandma, did you know Mom's been collecting over $1,200 monthly in rental income while claiming she couldn't afford her bills? Rental income. She's been renting out bedrooms in her apartment to college students. She's been making plenty of money while accepting $4,000 monthly from me. $4,000? That seems like a lot. It is a lot. It was almost all of my disposable income. Well, if you couldn't afford to help, you should have said something. I did say something last week, and instead of understanding, Mom accused me of being jealous of Jake. Maybe you are a little jealous, dear. Jake's always been more social and outgoing than you. I'm not jealous of Jake, Grandma. I'm angry that he's been taking credit for financial support that came from my bank account. I'm sure Jake appreciates your help, even if he doesn't always express it properly. The conversation with Grandma was the most frustrating because she clearly loved both Mom and me, but she'd been fed a completely false narrative about the situation. By the end of the day, I'd received calls from 7 family members, 2 family friends, and even Mrs. Henderson from Mom's neighborhood. The consistent theme was that I was being selfish, vindictive, and ungrateful. Not one person had asked for my side of the story before calling to criticize my decisions. Marcus found me crying on the couch that evening, overwhelmed by the family pressure campaign. They all think I'm a terrible person, I told him. They all think Mom's a victim and I'm the villain. Because they don't have accurate information about what actually happened. Should I try to explain the truth to them? You can try, but people who've already decided you're wrong probably aren't interested in hearing evidence that contradicts their opinion. So what do I do? You protect yourself and let time reveal the truth. Once the legal process plays out and the facts become public, your family will understand what really happened. What if they don't? Then you'll know who in your family actually cares about your well-being versus who just wants to maintain the status quo regardless of the cost to you. That night, I made the difficult decision to temporarily block most of my extended family on social media and send their calls to voicemail. I needed space to process the legal situation without constant guilt trips and manipulation attempts. The family pressure campaign had revealed something important. My family's definition of loyalty required me to accept abuse, fraud, and manipulation without complaint. Anyone who challenged that dynamic was seen as disloyal, regardless of the legitimacy of their concerns. For the first time in my life, I was choosing my own well-being over family approval, and it was both terrifying and liberating. I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk Wednesday morning when Rebecca from HR knocked on my cubicle wall. "Shelley, there's someone here to see you." He says it's regarding a legal matter. My heart sank. I'd hoped to keep my family drama separate from my professional life, but apparently that wasn't possible. In the lobby, I found a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, holding a thick folder and looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Ms. Shelley Morgan." "Yes. I'm Detective Ray Coleman with Financial Crimes Division. I need to speak with you about some fraudulent loan applications that may involve your identity. Can we discuss this outside? I'd prefer not to handle personal legal matters at my workplace." "Of course." We walked to a coffee shop across the street from my office building. Detective Coleman ordered black coffee and spread several documents across our table. "Ms. Morgan, we're investigating a series of predatory lending operations in the area. Your name has appeared on multiple loan applications with questionable documentation. Are you familiar with any of these lending companies?" He showed me a list of company names I'd never heard of: Quick Cash Solutions, Emergency Funding, now Rapid Approval Loans, and several others with similarly generic names. "I've never applied for loans with any of these companies." That's what we suspected. These companies target people with good credit by using stolen or falsified applications. Someone has been taking out high-interest loans using your identity and credit profile. He handed me copies of loan applications bearing my forged signature and stolen personal information. "When were these applications submitted?" "Over the past 6 months. Total amount borrowed across all companies, $19,400. My stomach dropped. $19,000. In loans I never applied for. Unfortunately, yes. These predatory lenders don't verify income or employment carefully. They rely on credit scores and basic personal information to approve loans quickly. How did someone get my personal information? That's what we're trying to determine. The applications include your social security number, birth date, employment information, and even copies of pay stubs. Someone with access to your personal documents has been systematically applying for these loans. I thought about Jake's admission of unemployment and Mom's interception of my mail. I believe my brother may have stolen my documents and applied for these loans. "Your brother, do you live together?" "No, but he had access to my mother's apartment where some of my mail was being sent, and my mother has admitted to intercepting my financial statements." Detective Coleman took notes. We see family identity theft frequently in these predatory lending cases. Family members often have access to personal information and assume they can borrow relatives' identities temporarily. What kinds of lenders are these? The worst kind: high-interest operations that charge 20 to 30% interest rates. Some of them are legal but predatory. Others operate outside banking regulations entirely. So these aren't legitimate banks. Some are licensed lenders. Others are basically loan sharks with business licenses. Your brother, if he's responsible, may owe money to some very dangerous people. That possibility hadn't occurred to me. I'd been focused on the fraud aspect, but I hadn't considered that Jake might have gotten involved with criminal organizations. What happens if the loans aren't repaid? Legitimate lenders will pursue collection through legal channels. The illegal operations use more direct methods. More direct? Threats, harassment, sometimes physical intimidation. These organizations don't rely on credit reporting or court systems to collect debts. Detective Coleman showed me additional documents. Several of these lenders have been calling your workplace asking to verify employment for loan applications. Your HR department has been receiving multiple calls over the past month. That explained why Rebecca had been asking me about personal calls and seemed concerned about my situation. My employer knows about these calls. They're required to verify employment when legitimate lenders call, but they're also required to report suspicious activity. Your HR director contacted us when she received 7 employment verification requests in 1 week. 7 requests. Your brother appears to have been applying for multiple loans simultaneously, probably hoping to get approval from several sources before any individual lender could investigate thoroughly. I felt sick thinking about how this would affect my professional reputation. My coworkers probably thought I was involved in some kind of financial scam. Detective Coleman, I filed identity theft charges against my mother 2 days ago for credit card fraud. Should I include these loan applications in that case? Absolutely. These appear to be part of the same pattern of family identity theft. But Ms. Morgan, there's something else you need to know. He pulled out a different set of documents with a more official appearance. 2 of these lending companies have been contacting you directly demanding payment. They've sent certified letters to your address and your workplace. I haven't received any certified letters. According to postal records, the letters were delivered to your mother's address, not your current address. My mother's been intercepting letters from loan companies too. It appears so. These letters threaten legal action if payments aren't received within 10 days. One of them threatens to garnish your wages. Can they do that? If they obtain a court judgment, yes. But since you didn't actually take out these loans, you can dispute the debts and sue for damages. How long does that process take? Months to years, depending on how aggressively the lenders pursue collection. And in the meantime, these fraudulent debts will appear on your credit report and may impact your ability to get legitimate loans or even rent apartments. I was starting to understand why Detective Coleman had looked uncomfortable when he'd arrived at my office. This wasn't just a simple family fraud case. It was a complex financial crime that could have serious long-term consequences for my credit, my employment, and even my physical safety if dangerous lenders were involved. What do I need to do to protect myself? First, file police reports for each fraudulent loan. Second, contact each lender to dispute the debts and demand proof of your consent. Third, lock your credit reports so no additional accounts can be opened. Fourth, document everything for potential civil lawsuits against your family members. Civil lawsuits. Ms. Morgan, the damages from this identity theft could easily exceed $50,000 when you factor in the fraudulent debts, damaged credit, legal fees, and lost opportunities. You may need to sue your brother and mother to recover those costs and protect your financial future. We spent another hour reviewing the loan documents and discussing next steps. By the time I returned to work, I'd missed an important client meeting and had to explain my absence to my supervisor. Shelley is everything. All right, Rebecca mentioned there have been some concerning calls about loan verifications. I'm dealing with family identity theft. Someone has been applying for loans using my information without my permission. That's terrible. Do you need time off to handle the legal aspects? I might need a few hours here and there for meetings with police and attorneys. Of course. And Shelley, I want you to know that we don't consider this a reflection on your character or your job performance. Identity theft victims aren't responsible for crimes committed against them. I appreciated my supervisor's understanding, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Even innocent victims of financial crime sometimes face professional consequences when their personal lives become complicated. That evening, I called Jake directly to confront him about the predatory loans. Jake, did you apply for loans using my identity with companies like Quick Cash Solutions and Emergency Funding Now? Long pause. I might have filled out some applications. Might have, Jake, you took out $19,000 in high-interest loans using my stolen information. I was desperate. Okay, I owed people money, and I thought I could get a quick loan to cover my debts until I found work. You owed people money. What people? Just some guys I met through online gambling. I got in over my head and they were demanding payment. How much money do you owe to gambling debts? It's not that much. Maybe 8 or 10,000. Maybe you don't know exactly how much you owe to people who are threatening you. The amount keeps changing with interest and fees. These guys aren't exactly transparent about their accounting methods. I realized Jake had gotten involved with illegal gambling operations and was now trapped between criminal lenders demanding payment and fraudulent loan companies that would also demand payment. Jake, some of these loan companies are basically loan sharks. You've borrowed money from dangerous people to pay dangerous people. I know it's complicated, but I had a plan. What plan? I was going to use the loan money to pay off the gambling debts, then get a job and pay off the loans gradually. Except you applied for the loans using my identity, so I'm legally responsible for the debts. I thought maybe you could help me pay them off once I explained the situation. Even in the middle of a crisis he'd created, Jake still expected me to solve his problems financially. Jake, I'm not paying off fraudulent loans you took out in my name. You're going to have to face the consequences of your choices. But what if these people come after you instead of me? Then I'll call the police and have them arrested for harassment. It's not that simple, Shelley. These aren't people who care about police reports. For the first time since this crisis began, I felt genuinely afraid. Jake's fraud hadn't just stolen my money and damaged my credit, it had potentially put me in physical danger. Jake, you need to turn yourself into the police immediately. This is way beyond family financial disputes now. I can't go to jail, Shelley. I won't survive in jail. Then you should have thought about that before committing multiple felonies. I hung up and immediately called Detective Coleman to report Jake's admission about gambling debts and dangerous lenders. Whatever sympathy I'd felt for my brother's unemployment situation was now completely overshadowed by the realization that his choices had created genuine safety risks for me. The family financial crisis had escalated into something much more serious, and I was no longer dealing with simple fraud. I was dealing with criminal networks and potentially violent debt collectors who thought I owed them $19,000. 3 days after my conversation with Detective Coleman about the predatory loans, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I'd been screening calls from unknown numbers since the family pressure campaign began, but something made me answer this one. Is this Shelley Morgan? An elderly woman's voice shaky but determined. Yes, this is Shelley. This is Mrs. Henderson from your mother's building. I'm calling because there's something you need to know about your mother's living situation. What about it? Well, dear, your mother received an eviction notice yesterday, and she's been telling everyone in the building that you refuse to help her with rent. But I think there are some things about this building you don't know. Mrs. Henderson asked me to meet her at a diner near Mom's apartment building. When I arrived, I found a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a folder full of documents. Shelley, I've been living in that building for 12 years, and I've watched your mother's situation very carefully. There are some things she hasn't told you about how this building operates. What kind of things? First, the eviction notice isn't for unpaid rent. It's because the City Housing Authority is shutting down the building for code violations. She showed me a copy of the official notice which cited numerous safety and legal violations. The building had been operating as rental housing without proper permits, with illegal subdivisions of apartments, inadequate fire safety measures, and violations of occupancy limits. The landlords have been running this place illegally for years, Mrs. Henderson explained. They target people with poor credit or unstable situations because they know we won't complain about the conditions. What kind of conditions? No proper heat in winter, electrical problems, plumbing that barely works, and they charge premium rent for substandard housing. Your mother pays $800 for an apartment that should legally rent for maybe $500. I thought about Mom's complaints about high utility bills. Is that why her electric bill is so high? Probably. The wiring in these apartments is ancient, and the landlord subdivided units without upgrading the electrical systems. Plus, they encourage tenants to sublet rooms to college students and take a cut of the rental income. They take a cut. Oh, yes, dear, your mother doesn't get to keep all that rental money she collects. The building management takes 30% of any subletting income as an administrative fee. That explained why Mom's rental income hadn't been enough to cover her expenses, even though the amount seemed substantial. Mrs. Henderson pulled out more documents, but here's the important part. The city attorney's office is pursuing a class action lawsuit against the building owners for illegal rental practices. Tenants who've been overcharged or exploited may be entitled to significant compensation. How significant? Based on what happened with similar cases, possibly thousands of dollars in refunds plus damages. Your mother could be looking at a settlement of $15,000 to $20,000. I stared at the legal documents. Mom had been portrayed as a struggling victim of housing costs, but she'd actually been a victim of predatory landlords who were operating an illegal rental scheme. Mrs. Henderson, does Mom know about the potential settlement? The landlords certainly don't want tenants to know about it. They've been trying to pressure everyone to move out quietly without filing complaints, but the legal aid office has been contacting tenants to explain their rights. Has legal aid contacted Mom? They've sent letters to all tenants, but I suspect your mother's mail situation has been complicated. Of course, Jake had probably intercepted the legal aid letters along with everything else. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward conspiratorially. Shelley, there's something else. Your mother's been telling people in the building that she's broke and struggling, but several neighbors have seen your brother taking cash from her regularly. How much cash? Mrs. Patterson in 3B saw him take what looked like several $100s from your mother last week, and Mr. Rodriguez said your brother asked to borrow $60 from him last month, claiming he was short on gas money. Jake's been borrowing money from Mom's elderly neighbors. Not just borrowing, dear. Mrs. Chen in 4A said her purse went missing from her apartment after your brother helped her carry groceries upstairs. It turned up later with the cash missing. My blood ran cold. Are you saying Jake's been stealing from elderly neighbors? I'm saying there have been several incidents of missing money and belongings that coincide with your brother's visits to the building. But nobody wanted to accuse Patricia's son of theft, so we've all been keeping quiet. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, maybe longer? I thought about the timeline, Jake's unemployment, the fraudulent loans, the gambling debts. He'd been stealing from vulnerable elderly people to fund his lifestyle and pay his debts. Mrs. Henderson, have any of the neighbors reported these thefts to police? We've discussed it, but your mother gets so upset when anyone suggests Jake might be involved in wrongdoing. She becomes very defensive and sometimes stops speaking to people who raise concerns about him. So Mom's been protecting Jake while he steals from her neighbors. I think your mother loves Jake but doesn't want to see his problems clearly, and Jake takes advantage of that protective instinct. Mrs. Henderson handed me a business card. This is the attorney handling the class action lawsuit. You should contact him about your mother's situation. Even if she moves out of the building, she's still entitled to compensation for the years of illegal rental practices. I took the card and called the attorney's office immediately. The paralegal who answered was familiar with Mom's case and confirmed that she was eligible for a substantial compensation. Patricia Morgan has been a tenant for 3 years and has been overcharged by approximately $300 monthly during that time. Plus, the illegal subletting arrangement where the building management took 30% of her rental income adds another potential $8,000 in damages. So she could receive around $19,000 in settlement money, possibly more depending on how the final settlement is calculated, but she needs to participate in the class action suit and provide documentation of her rental payments. What kind of documentation? Bank records showing rent payments, receipts from the building management records of the subletting income arrangements, and a statement about any problems she experienced with housing conditions. I had most of that documentation from my own banking records since I'd been paying Mom's rent for 3 years. After meeting with Mrs. Henderson, I drove to Mom's building to see the conditions for myself. The exterior was shabby, with peeling paint and broken windows covered with plywood. The hallways smelled of mold and cooking odors, and several apartments had obvious fire hazards like extension cords running under doorways. It was clear that Mom had been living in substandard housing while paying premium rent, and the landlords had been exploiting tenants who had limited options due to credit problems or financial instability. But it was also clear that Mom's financial crisis wasn't as dire as she'd portrayed. Between the potential legal settlement, her Social Security benefits, and her legitimate rental income after the building management's illegal cut, she had resources available that could provide financial stability. I called Mom's jail to arrange a visit. When she appeared behind the glass partition, she looked exhausted and defeated. "Mom, I need to talk to you about your building and some legal matters." "I don't want to discuss legal matters. I want to discuss when you're going to drop these ridiculous charges and get me out of here." "I'm not dropping the charges, but I do have some potentially good news about your housing situation." I explained the class action lawsuit and the potential settlement money. Mom listened with growing interest as I outlined how much compensation she might receive. $19,000. Maybe more, but you need to participate in the lawsuit and provide documentation. "What kind of documentation?" "Bank records, rental receipts, and information about the subletting arrangements." Mom's expression grew cautious. "I'm not sure I want to get involved in a lawsuit against my landlords." "Why not? They've been stealing from you for 3 years. "Because lawsuits are complicated and I don't want to make enemies of people who control my housing." "Mom, the building is being shut down anyway. You have to move regardless. But if you participate in the lawsuit, you could have enough money to secure decent housing and live independently." Independently. Yes, with $19,000 plus your Social Security and legitimate rental income, you could afford a nice apartment and wouldn't need financial help from anyone. For the first time since this crisis began, Mom seemed to consider the possibility of actual financial independence rather than dependence on others. What would I need to do? Contact the legal aid attorney, provide documentation of your rental history, and be honest about the subletting arrangements and building conditions. And that would give me enough money to be self-sufficient. More than enough. Mom was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating her potential independence for the first time in years. "Shelley, if I did this lawsuit and got that money, would we be able to fix our relationship?" "Mom, our relationship problems aren't about money. They're about honesty, respect, and boundaries. Money won't fix those issues." "But if I weren't financially dependent on you anymore?" "That would remove one source of conflict, yes, but we'd still need to address the lies, the fraud, and the manipulation." "I know I've made mistakes." "They weren't mistakes, Mom. They were choices, and until you take responsibility for those choices, money won't solve anything." I left Mom with the attorney's contact information and a clear understanding that her financial problems might have solutions that didn't involve exploiting her children. Whether she chose to pursue those solutions would be an important indicator of whether she was genuinely interested in change or just looking for new ways to avoid accountability. For the first time since this crisis began, I felt like there might be a path forward that could lead to genuine healing and healthy relationships. But that path would require my family to choose honesty and independence over manipulation and dependence. 2 days after my jail visit with Mom, my phone rang at 11:30 at night. The caller ID showed Jake's number, which I'd unblocked temporarily to monitor any threats related to the predatory loans. Shelly Jake's voice was slurred and panicked. "I need help. I'm in serious trouble." "Are you drunk?" "Maybe a little, but that's not the point. The point is that some very dangerous people are looking for me, and I think they might come after you next." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. What people? "The guys I borrowed money from. They found out the loan applications were fraudulent, so now they think I scammed them, and they want their money, plus interest, plus penalties." "How much money?" $38,000. $38,000. You said it was 8 or 10,000 in gambling debts. It was, but with interest and penalties and the new loans that got discovered, it's grown to 38,000. And these guys don't negotiate payment plans. "Where are you now?" "I'm staying at a motel outside the city. I've been hiding here for 2 days, but I'm running out of money and they're asking around about where I live and work." "Jake, you need to turn yourself into the police immediately." "I can't go to jail, Shelly, and I can't pay these guys $38,000. I don't know what to do." Despite everything Jake had done to me, hearing him, this terrified and desperate, triggered my protective instincts. "Are you safe where you are right now?" "I think so, but I can't stay here much longer." "Jake, I need you to tell me the complete truth about everything. No more lies, no more manipulation. If you're really in danger, I need to understand the entire situation." Okay, I'll tell you everything." And for the first time in months, Jake actually did tell me everything. He'd lost his job 8 months ago for poor performance and attendance issues related to his gambling. He'd been gambling online for over 2 years, starting with small sports bets that gradually escalated to high-stakes poker and casino games. At first, I was winning pretty regularly. I thought I was good at it. I was making more money gambling than I was at my actual job. But then you started losing. Yeah, big time. And when you're losing, you convince yourself that the next bet will turn everything around, so you bet bigger amounts trying to win back what you lost. By the time he'd lost his job, Jake owed $12,000 to various online gambling sites and had maxed out his credit cards trying to cover the debts. That's when I started using Mom's money to place bets. I thought if I could just win one big hand, I could pay back everything I owed and still have money left over to support Mom properly. But you kept losing. I kept losing, and the debts kept growing, and I got desperate. That desperation had led to the forged loan applications, identity theft, and eventually to stealing cash from Mom's elderly neighbors. "Jake, Mrs. Henderson told me neighbors have been missing money and belongings when you visit the building." Long pause. I never meant for it to go that far. "How far did it go?" "I borrowed small amounts from a few neighbors. Just $20 or $40 at a time, claiming I was short on gas money or needed to buy groceries for Mom." "That's not borrowing if you never intended to pay it back." "I intended to pay it back once I got my finances straightened out." "What about Mrs. Chen's missing purse money?" Jake's voice cracked. "I found her purse sitting open on her kitchen counter when I was helping with groceries. She'd gone to the bathroom and there was like $60 in cash just sitting there. I thought she wouldn't notice if I took just 20. "But you took all 60. "I took 40. I left 20 so it wouldn't be obvious." "Jake, that's theft from an elderly woman." I know it's theft. I know it's terrible. I hate myself for it." "How many neighbors have you stolen from?" Maybe 6 or 7, but never large amounts, just enough to cover immediate expenses or place a bet that I was sure would pay off. The scope of Jake's criminal activity was staggering: identity theft, credit fraud, elder theft, and now he owed dangerous money to illegal gambling operations. Jake, what kind of gambling operation did you get involved with? It started online, but when I couldn't pay what I owed to the legitimate sites, they connected me with people who offered private loans to cover gambling debts. Loan sharks. Yeah, guys who loan money at really high interest rates to gamblers who can't get credit anywhere else. How high? Like 20% per week. So if you borrow $1,000, you owe $1,200 the next week. That's impossible to pay back unless you're winning consistently. Right, and I wasn't winning consistently, so the debts just kept compounding. And that's how 8,000 became 38,000. That, plus the fraudulent bank loans. When those loans got discovered, the loan sharks demanded immediate repayment because they thought I was trying to scam them. Jake explained that the illegal lenders had found out about the police investigation into the predatory loans and assumed Jake was cooperating with law enforcement to avoid paying his gambling debts. They think you're going to testify against them in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Are you going to testify against them? I don't know anything useful about their operation. I just borrowed money and couldn't pay it back. But they don't believe that. No. And now they want the full 38,000 immediately, or they're going to start hurting people connected to me. Connected to you, how? Family members, people at your workplace, anyone they can use to pressure me into paying. My worst fears were being realized. Jake's gambling addiction and criminal choices hadn't just affected him. They'd potentially put me, mom, and innocent people at my workplace in physical danger. Jake, you have to turn yourself in to the police tonight. What if they can't protect me from these guys? What if they can't protect me and mom and my coworkers if you don't turn yourself in? Jake was crying now. I never wanted it to affect anyone else. I thought I could handle it on my own. By stealing from elderly neighbors, I was desperate. I know it's not an excuse, but I was so scared of what would happen if I couldn't make payments that I stopped thinking clearly. How long have you been stealing from neighbors? Maybe 4 months. It started small, just asking to borrow $20 here and there. But when people started saying no, I got more creative about finding opportunities. Creative how? Helping with groceries and keeping change. Volunteering to run errands and pocketing some of the money, looking for cash that was left out in the open when I was visiting people's apartments. Jake, do you understand that you've been preying on vulnerable elderly people? I understand now, but at the time I was just focused on getting enough money to make my next payment and buy myself more time. Time for what? To win back everything you'd lost. I guess. I kept thinking that if I could just place one big, successful bet, I could pay off all my debts and start over clean. But gambling debts don't work that way. I know that now. We talked for another hour about the extent of Jake's gambling problem and criminal activity. By the end of the conversation, it was clear that he needed immediate intervention for both the addiction and the legal consequences. Jake, I want you to call Detective Coleman right now and arrange to turn yourself in. Tonight? Tonight. Tell him about the gambling debts, the loan sharks, and the thefts from neighbors. Tell him you're willing to cooperate with any investigation in exchange for protection. What about jail? You're probably going to jail regardless, but if you cooperate, you might get a shorter sentence and protection from the people who are threatening you. Will you visit me if I get arrested? I thought about that question. Despite everything Jake had done, he was still my brother, and his gambling addiction was a real disease that had driven him to desperate choices. If you genuinely commit to getting help for your gambling addiction and making restitution to the people you've hurt, then yes, I'll support your recovery. But if you're just trying to manipulate me into helping you avoid consequences, then no. I want help, Shelley. I'm tired of lying and stealing and being terrified all the time. I just want my life back. Then, call Detective Coleman right now while I'm on the phone and arrange to surrender yourself. Jake called Detective Coleman from the motel and arranged to meet at the police station in 1 hour. I agreed to drive to the station and be there when he turned himself in, not as his enabler, but as moral support for someone finally choosing accountability over avoidance. For the first time since this crisis began, Jake was telling the truth and accepting responsibility for his choices. It was too late to undo the damage he'd caused, but it wasn't too late for him to start making better decisions. Whether that change would be genuine or just another manipulation attempt remained to be seen, but at least he was finally facing the consequences of his actions instead of creating new victims. The morning after Jake turned himself in, Mrs. Henderson called me with unexpected news. "Shelley, dear, the neighbors in your mother's building would like to meet with you. We've been talking about Jake's situation and the thefts, and we think there might be a better way to handle this than just sending him to prison." What kind of better way? Well, several of us have experience with family addiction problems, and we know that jail doesn't always help people get better. We were wondering if you'd be interested in discussing restorative justice options. What does that mean? It means focusing on repairing the harm Jake caused rather than just punishing him. If he's willing to take responsibility and make amends, we might be able to find a solution that helps everyone involved. Mrs. Henderson invited me to a community meeting that evening at the local senior center. When I arrived, I found 12 elderly residents from Mom's building, plus a social worker, a retired judge, and surprisingly Mom herself, who'd been released on bail that afternoon. "Hello, Shelley," Mom said quietly. I asked if I could participate in this meeting. "Why?" "Because Jake's problems affected all these people, and I feel responsible for not addressing his behavior earlier." The retired judge, a dignified woman in her 70s, named Judge Morrison, facilitated the meeting. "Shelley, we've asked you here because your brother's actions hurt several members of this community, but we've also seen how his addiction and criminal behavior have hurt your family. We're interested in exploring whether there's a path forward that addresses everyone's needs." She explained that restorative justice focused on 3 key questions. What harm was caused? What needs to be done to repair that harm? How can we prevent similar harm in the future? Traditional prosecution might send Jake to jail for several months or years, but that doesn't help the people he stole from recover their money, and it doesn't address the underlying addiction that drove his behavior. Mrs. Chen, whose purse money Jake had stolen, spoke first. "I'm not interested in seeing a young man go to prison if there's another way to handle this, but I do want him to understand how his actions affected me." "How did they affect you?" Judge Morrison asked. "I stopped trusting people. I started hiding my money and locking my apartment even when I went to the laundry room. I felt foolish for being trusting, and I felt angry that someone I'd been kind to would take advantage of me." Other neighbors shared similar experiences. Jake's thefts had made them feel unsafe in their own building and suspicious of people who offered help. Mr. Rodriguez, who'd lent Jake money for gas, described the broader impact. "It wasn't just about the $60. It was about feeling like I'd been played for a fool by someone who seemed genuinely in need." "What would help repair that harm?" Judge Morrison asked. Mrs. Patterson had clearly thought about this. "I'd want a genuine apology that showed he understood the impact of his choices. I'd want my money returned. And I'd want to know he was getting help for his addiction so this doesn't happen to other people." "What else?" Mrs. Henderson suggested community service. "This building has a lot of elderly residents who could use help with errands and maintenance. If Jake worked here regularly under supervision, he could contribute something positive instead of just taking from people." The social worker, a young woman named Maria Santos, explained how restorative justice could work in Jake's case. "If Jake accepts responsibility for his actions and agrees to participate, we could arrange for him to meet with each person he harmed make full restitution, and commit to ongoing addiction treatment and community service. What about the gambling debts to dangerous people? I asked. That's a separate issue that law enforcement will need to handle, but the community level harm can be addressed through restorative processes if everyone agrees. Judge Morrison turned to Mom. Patricia, what's your perspective on this approach? Mom looked uncomfortable but thoughtful. I've been enabling Jake's behavior for years without realizing it. I gave him money when he claimed emergencies. I made excuses for him when neighbors complained. I defended him instead of holding him accountable. How do you feel about that now? I feel like I failed everyone in this room by not addressing Jake's problems when they first became apparent. What would help you feel like you'd address those failures? I'd want to apologize to everyone Jake hurt. I'd want to help him get proper treatment for his addiction. And I'd want to learn how to support his recovery without enabling his destructive behavior. Mrs. Santos explained that family involvement was crucial for a successful addiction recovery. Patricia, would you be willing to participate in family counseling and support groups for relatives of gambling addicts? Yes. I realize I don't know how to help Jake in healthy ways. The meeting continued for 2 hours, with each neighbor explaining what they'd need to feel that justice had been served. The consensus was remarkable. Everyone preferred restitution, accountability, and community healing over traditional punishment. What would this look like practically, I asked? Judge Morrison outlined a potential plan. Jake would plead guilty to theft charges, but receive a suspended sentence conditioned on complete restitution, addiction treatment, and 2 years of supervised community service. He'd meet individually with each victim to make personalized apologies and understand the specific impact of his actions. He'd also be required to attend weekly Gamblers Anonymous meetings, monthly financial counseling sessions, and regular check-ins with a probation officer who specializes in addiction cases. And if he doesn't follow through, then he serves the original jail sentence plus additional charges for violating probation. Mrs. Chen raised her hand. What about the young man's safety? If dangerous people are looking for him, how do we protect him while he's doing community service? That was a practical concern I hadn't considered. The restorative justice approach required Jake to be active in the community, but the loan sharks might still be hunting for him. Maria Santos addressed this. The police investigation has identified several members of the illegal lending operation. If Jake cooperates with that investigation, he might receive protection through witness programs. But cooperation means testifying against dangerous people, I said. It means providing information that helps law enforcement shut down operations that prey on people with gambling addictions. Jake wasn't the only victim of these loan sharks. Judge Morrison looked directly at me. Shelley, this approach only works if Jake genuinely wants to change and if his family supports accountability rather than enabling. What's your assessment of his readiness for real change? I thought about Jake's confession the night before, his willingness to turn himself in, and his apparent exhaustion with lying and manipulation. I think he's ready to try genuine change, but I also think he's manipulated people before by appearing remorseful when he was just trying to avoid consequences. How would you distinguish between genuine change and manipulation? Genuine change would involve him accepting responsibility without making excuses, following through on commitments even when it's difficult, and prioritizing other people's well-being over his own convenience. And if he proves he's genuinely changing, then I'd support his recovery and work toward rebuilding our family relationships with appropriate boundaries. And if he proves he's still manipulating, then I'd support whatever legal consequences are necessary to protect future victims. At the end of the meeting, the group agreed to propose the restorative justice approach to the district attorney's office with the understanding that Jake would need to accept responsibility and commit to the program voluntarily. Mom approached me as people were leaving. Shelley, I want you to know that participating in this meeting helped me understand how much damage I've caused by enabling Jake's behavior. How so? Listening to these people describe how Jake's actions affected them made me realize that my protection and excuses didn't help Jake. They just created more victims. What are you going to do with that realization? I'm going to stop protecting Jake from consequences and start supporting his recovery instead. And I'm going to take responsibility for my own choices instead of expecting you to solve my problems. For the first time in months, Mom sounded like she genuinely understood the difference between helping and enabling. Whether she could maintain that understanding under pressure remained to be seen, but it was an encouraging start. The community meeting had shown me something important. Accountability didn't have to mean destruction. When people focused on repairing harm rather than inflicting punishment, healing was possible for everyone involved. But that healing required genuine change, not just temporary remorse. Jake would have the opportunity to prove his commitment to recovery, and our family would have the opportunity to rebuild relationships based on honesty and respect, rather than manipulation and dependence. 3 days after the community meeting, Mom called and asked if she could visit my apartment. Her voice was different, subdued and thoughtful rather than defensive or manipulative. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and there are some things I need to say to you privately. When she arrived, she looked like she'd aged years in the past week. Her usual put-together appearance was replaced by simple clothes and no makeup, and she carried herself with less of the dramatic flair I'd grown accustomed to. "Can we sit down?" she asked. "This might take a while." We sat on my couch with coffee, and for the first time in recent memory, Mom didn't immediately launch into complaints or requests for help. "Shelley, I need to tell you some things I should have told you months ago, maybe years ago." "Okay." "I've known about Jake's gambling problem since last Christmas." I stared at her. "Since Christmas you've known for almost a year." "I caught him going through my purse on Christmas morning when he thought I was in the shower. When I confronted him, he broke down and told me about the online gambling and the debts." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was terrified of what would happen to him if you found out. You were already supporting our family financially, and I was afraid that if you knew Jake was gambling away money, you'd stop helping both of us. So you let me continue sending money that you knew was funding his addictions." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I could manage the situation. I thought if I gave Jake smaller amounts of money and monitored his spending, I could help him gradually pay off his debts and get better. But that's not how addiction works. I know that now, but at the time I thought love and supervision could fix the problem. I thought if I just watched him closely enough and controlled his access to money, he'd stop gambling." She explained that she'd been giving Jake cash from my monthly payments, thinking she could limit his gambling by only providing small amounts at specific times. I told myself I was protecting both of you, protecting Jake from consequences that might destroy him, and protecting you from knowing about problems you couldn't fix. "Mom, that's called enabling." I didn't know that word then. I thought enabling meant encouraging bad behavior. I didn't realize that protecting someone from consequences was the same thing. Mom had attended her first Al-Anon meeting while out on bail, where she'd learned about the difference between helping and enabling. The people in that meeting explained that everything I'd been doing to help Jake was actually making his addiction worse. Every time I gave him money or made excuses for him or protected him from facing consequences, I was teaching him that other people would solve his problems. "When did you realize this?" Listening to those neighbors describe how Jake's stealing affected them, I realized that my protection hadn't helped Jake at all. It had just delayed his consequences while creating new victims. She pulled out a small notebook. "I've been writing down all the ways I enabled Jake's addiction and all the ways I manipulated you into supporting that enabling." The list was extensive and painfully honest. She'd lied about the extent of her rental income. She'd exaggerated her expenses to justify my larger payments. She'd intercepted my mail to control information flow. She'd defended Jake against neighbors' complaints instead of investigating their concerns. Most importantly, she said, reading from her notes, I made you feel guilty for having boundaries. Every time you questioned my financial requests or Jake's behavior, I accused you of being selfish or uncaring. Why did you do that? Because your guilt was easier to manage than Jake's addiction. If I could convince you that you were obligated to help regardless of circumstances, then I didn't have to address the real problems. What about the birthday dinner when you accused me of being jealous of Jake? Mom closed her eyes as if the memory was physically painful. I'd been dreading that dinner for weeks because I knew your payments to me were funding Jake's gambling, but I also knew you'd stop helping if you found out the truth. So you attacked me instead of telling me the truth. I attacked you because I was panicking about losing control of the situation. If you stopped sending money, Jake would face immediate consequences for his gambling debts, and I'd have to confront the fact that my enabling had made everything worse. But attacking me at my birthday dinner was easier than facing reality. Yes, and I've spent the last week realizing how cruel and manipulative that was. She'd also been attending therapy sessions with a counselor who specialized in family addiction dynamics. My therapist helped me understand that I've been using you as a buffer between Jake and his consequences. Instead of letting him face the natural results of his choices, I convinced you to provide resources that delayed those consequences. What's the difference between that and just helping family? Helping means providing support that enables someone to solve their own problems. What I was doing was solving Jake's problems for him while making you pay the cost. Mom had brought copies of her banking records to show me the reality of her financial situation. I want you to see the truth about my income and expenses. I've been living comfortably while portraying myself as struggling because it was easier than admitting I was enabling Jake's addiction. Her actual monthly income was over $3,000 between Social Security rental income and occasional odd jobs. Her necessary expenses were less than $2,000 monthly. I've been using the extra $1,000 plus your monthly payments to fund Jake's lifestyle and gambling. I told myself I was helping him, but I was actually financing his self-destruction. Why didn't you just give Jake money directly instead of accepting money from me? Because giving Jake money felt like enabling, but accepting money from you felt like family support. I convinced myself there was a moral difference. But the end result was the same. The end result was worse because I was also teaching you that your financial well-being was less important than maintaining family peace. Mom had spent the week calculating the total cost of her manipulation and enabling. Over 3 years, I accepted $144,000 from you while I had sufficient income to cover my actual needs. I essentially stole $144,000 from your financial future to fund my son's addiction. Hearing her take full responsibility without excuses or justifications was remarkable, but I needed to understand if this insight would lead to lasting change. What are you going to do differently going forward? First, I'm going to continue Al-Anon meetings and therapy to learn how to support Jake's recovery without enabling his addiction. Second, I'm going to pursue financial independence so I never again put you in the position of subsidizing my choices. What does financial independence look like? The lawsuit against my building owners should provide enough money for a security deposit on a legitimate apartment. My Social Security and part-time work can cover basic living expenses, and if I can arrange appropriate rental income from one boarder, I'll have enough to live comfortably without help from anyone. And if Jake asks for money, I'll refer him to his addiction counselor and his support group. I won't give him cash under any circumstances, but I'll support his recovery in ways that don't enable continued gambling. What if he threatens to hurt himself or claims he's in danger? I'll call his probation officer or emergency services. I won't solve his crises with money. Mom had clearly been preparing for this conversation and had thought through the practical aspects of changed behavior. Shelley, I also want to apologize for the public humiliation at your workplace and the pressure campaign with extended family. I painted you as the villain to distract from my own failures as a mother. How are you going to address that? I've already started calling family members to explain the real situation and take responsibility for my manipulation. I want them to understand that you were protecting yourself from fraud, not abandoning family. What have their responses been? Mixed. Some people are angry at me for lying to them. Others are understanding about family addiction dynamics. But everyone deserves to know the truth instead of the version I created to make myself look sympathetic. We talked for another hour about practical steps for rebuilding our relationship based on honesty and appropriate boundaries. For the first time since I was a child, Mom sounded like a responsible adult taking ownership of her choices rather than a victim seeking rescue. One more thing, she said as she prepared to leave. I want you to know that forcing me to face reality by stopping the payments was the most loving thing you could have done. If you'd continued enabling my enabling, Jake would probably be dead from gambling-related violence by now, and I'd still be destroying your financial future while pretending I was helping family. It didn't feel loving at the time. The most loving things parents do for children often don't feel loving in the moment. And sometimes children have to do the most loving things for parents, even when the parents don't understand or appreciate it. After Mom left, I felt cautiously optimistic about the possibility of genuine healing in our family relationships. Her insights seemed authentic rather than manipulative, and her action plan showed concrete commitment to change rather than just promises. But I'd learned not to trust dramatic transformations without seeing sustained behavioral change over time. Mom's awakening was encouraging, but her follow-through would determine whether our relationship could be rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. 6 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Riverside Recovery Center, where Jake had been participating in an inpatient gambling addiction treatment program as part of his plea agreement. Ms. Morgan, this is Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Jake's addiction counselor. He's requested permission to call you, and I wanted to speak with you first about his progress in treatment. How is he doing? Honestly, better than I expected when he first arrived. Jake entered treatment very defensive and focused on minimizing his behavior, but he's made significant progress in accepting responsibility for his choices. She explained that Jake had been participating in individual therapy group counseling, financial recovery workshops, and daily Gamblers Anonymous meetings for 6 weeks. The turning point came about 3 weeks ago when he wrote letters of accountability to each person he'd stolen from. The process of detailing his specific actions and their impact seemed to help him to understand the scope of harm he'd caused. What kind of progress has he made? He's identified the emotional triggers that led to his gambling escalation. He's learned practical strategies for managing impulses and avoiding high-risk situations. Most importantly, he's developed genuine empathy for the people his addiction affected. Dr. Walsh explained that Jake had completed the first phase of treatment and was ready to transition to outpatient support while beginning his community service work. However, his success in long-term recovery will largely depend on having healthy family relationships with appropriate boundaries. That's why he's asking to speak with you. What does he want to discuss? He wants to apologize for the specific ways his actions affected you, and he wants to propose a structure for rebuilding your relationship that respects your boundaries while supporting his recovery. I agreed to take Jake's call, curious about whether his perspective had genuinely changed or whether this was another manipulation attempt. Shelley, Jake's voice was different, calmer and more thoughtful than I'd heard in years. Hi, Jake. Thank you for taking my call. I know you didn't have to do that after everything I put you through. How are you doing? I'm doing better than I have in years, actually. Treatment has been hard, but it's also been a relief to finally stop lying about everything. Jake explained that he'd spent weeks in therapy examining the progression of his gambling addiction and the criminal behavior it had led to. I realized that I started gambling because I felt like a failure compared to your professional success. But instead of dealing with those feelings constructively, I tried to prove I was successful too by winning money gambling. And when that didn't work, I doubled down because I couldn't face admitting that I'd failed even more dramatically, so I kept gambling with borrowed money, convinced that one big win would solve all my problems. What about the identity theft and stealing from neighbors? Those weren't accidents or mistakes. They were deliberate choices to prioritize my addiction over other people's well-being. I told myself I was just borrowing money temporarily, but I knew I couldn't pay it back, and I did it anyway. Jake's acknowledgement of intentionality was important because it showed he wasn't minimizing his behavior as accidental or excusable. I want to apologize specifically for using your identity to take out loans without your permission. I knew it was fraud and I knew it could damage your credit and your professional reputation. I did it anyway because I was desperate, and I convinced myself that I'd find a way to pay back the loans before you found out. What about taking credit for supporting Mom while I was the one paying the bills? That was about pride and image management. I couldn't stand the idea of people knowing I was unemployed and financially dependent on my sister. So I created a fake persona of being successful and generous while you were actually the one being generous. Jake had prepared specific apologies for different aspects of his behavior, showing he'd thought deeply about the various ways his choices had affected me. I also want to apologize for manipulating Mom into enabling my addiction. I knew she was getting money from you to give to me, and I knew that was destroying your financial stability, but I told myself it was temporary and that I'd pay everything back once I got control of my gambling. Do you understand why I had to stop the financial support? Yes. In treatment, I learned that enabling an addict's behavior doesn't help them. It actually delays their recovery by protecting them from consequences. If you'd continued sending money, I probably would have kept gambling until I got killed by loan sharks. What's your plan for staying in recovery? I'll be attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times weekly for the first year, then twice weekly after that. I'm working with a financial counselor to develop budget management skills and debt repayment strategies. And I'm participating in individual therapy to address the underlying emotional issues that contributed to my addiction. What about employment? I've been honest about my criminal record with potential employers, which has been humbling but also liberating. I have a job offer from a warehouse that specifically hires people in recovery programs. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest income, and they provide health insurance. Jake explained that his community service would involve helping elderly residents with errands and maintenance work supervised by the senior center staff. Working with elderly people feels appropriate since I stole from elderly people. I want to contribute positively to that community instead of just taking from them. What about restitution to the people you stole from? I'll be making monthly payments to each person until the full amounts are repaid with interest. The payments will come from my warehouse job income, not from family money. And your relationship with Mom? That's complicated. Mom's been attending Al-Anon meetings and learning about enabling behaviors, which is good, but I also need to establish independence from her because our dynamic has been unhealthy for both of us. Jake proposed a structured approach to rebuilding our family relationships that showed he'd been thinking seriously about healthy boundaries. I'd like to have monthly family dinners where we can maintain connection without daily financial or emotional entanglement. I want to prove through consistent behavior over time that I can be trustworthy rather than asking anyone to trust me based on promises. What does trustworthy behavior look like to you? Paying my own bills, showing up when I say I will, telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, and prioritizing other people's well-being when my wants conflict with their needs. And if you relapse or start gambling again, If I relapse, I want you to stop all contact with me until I complete additional treatment. I don't want anyone in the family to enable a relapse by providing money excuses or emotional protection from consequences. Jake's willingness to request accountability rather than understanding was a significant change from his previous manipulation tactics. Shelley, I know I've destroyed your trust and probably damaged our relationship permanently. I'm not asking you to forgive me or pretend everything is fine. I'm just asking for the opportunity to demonstrate change through actions over time. What would demonstrating change look like? Staying employed, making restitution payments on schedule, attending recovery meetings consistently, and being honest about struggles or challenges instead of hiding them. And maintaining those behaviors even when it's difficult or inconvenient. Especially when it's difficult or inconvenient. Anyone can be responsible when it's easy. Real change means being responsible when you don't want to be. After talking with Jake for an hour, I felt cautiously hopeful about his recovery, but committed to protecting myself from future manipulation. Jake, I'm willing to support your recovery with appropriate boundaries. That means monthly family contact encouragement for your recovery efforts and celebration of genuine milestones. But it doesn't mean financial support, crisis management, or protection from consequences if you make poor choices. That sounds fair and healthy. And if you try to manipulate me or return to dishonest behavior, I'll end our relationship without discussion or negotiation. I understand, and I hope I can prove that won't be necessary. 6 months of sustained recovery would be required before I'd consider any significant rebuilding of trust. But for the first time since Jake's crisis began, I felt like I was talking to someone committed to genuine change rather than someone looking for new ways to manipulate family relationships. Recovery was possible, but it would require consistent effort and accountability from Jake, appropriate support from family, and clear boundaries that protected everyone involved. 1 year later, I sat in my apartment preparing for my 29th birthday celebration, but this year felt completely different from the disastrous dinner that had started this entire crisis. Mom arrived first, carrying a small gift and wearing the kind of modest, comfortable clothing that had become her new normal since achieving genuine financial independence. Happy birthday, sweetie, she said, giving me a hug that felt natural rather than manipulative. Thanks, Mom. How are things going? Really well. The settlement money from the housing lawsuit came through last month, so I was able to put down a security deposit on a nice one-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. Mom had successfully transitioned to complete financial independence over the past year. Between her Social Security benefits, part-time work at a local senior center, and occasional rental income from a carefully vetted boarder, she was covering all her expenses without help from anyone. The best part is that I actually enjoy my job at the senior center. It feels good to help other people navigate resources and support systems instead of just being dependent on them myself. How's the Al-Anon program going? I haven't missed a meeting in 11 months. Learning about enabling versus helping has been life-changing, not just for my relationship with Jake, but for all my relationships. Mom had become a sponsor for other family members dealing with addiction, sharing her experience about the difference between supporting recovery and financing destructive behavior. Marcus arrived next, followed by Jake, who looked healthier and more confident than I'd seen him in years. Happy birthday, Shelly, Jake said, handing me a card. I know it's not much, but I wanted you to have something that represented where I am now. Inside the card was a receipt showing his final restitution payment to Mrs. Chen, the last of the elderly neighbors he'd stolen from. All debts paid in full 11 months and 3 weeks after I started making payments, he said proudly. Jake had maintained steady employment at the warehouse, attended recovery meetings consistently, and completed over 400 hours of community service at the senior center. His transformation had been gradual but genuine, marked by increased responsibility rather than dramatic promises. How's work going? I got promoted to shift supervisor last month. It's the first time in years that I've earned something through honest effort rather than manipulation or luck. And the gambling urges? They're manageable now. I have strategies for dealing with triggers, and I have people I can call when I'm struggling. Most importantly, I've learned to be honest about problems before they become crises. Jake had been dating someone he'd met in Gamblers Anonymous, and their relationship was built on mutual accountability and shared commitment to recovery rather than enabling dynamics. We're taking things slowly because we both understand that addiction recovery requires emotional stability before you can be the good partner to someone else. The four of us had dinner at my apartment, sharing conversation that felt natural and honest, rather than strained by hidden agendas or unspoken resentments. Shelly Mom said during dessert, "I want to thank you again for forcing our family to face reality instead of continuing the enabling cycle." How so? If you'd kept sending money and making excuses for Jake's behavior, he probably would have escalated to more dangerous criminal activity, and I would have continued manipulating you while destroying your financial future. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The hardest things are usually the most important things, Jake added. Your boundaries forced me to choose between recovery and self-destruction. If you'd made it easy to continue gambling and lying, I might have chosen self-destruction. Over the past year, I'd rebuilt my savings significantly. Without the $4,000 monthly drain of supporting two other adults, I'd been able to pay off credit card debt, build an emergency fund, and even start saving for a house down payment. My financial advisor says I'll be able to buy a house within 2 years if I continue my current savings rate, I told them. That's amazing, Mom said. And you're accomplishing that through your own hard work rather than sacrificing your future to enable family dysfunction. Marcus raised his wine glass. I want to toast Shelley's courage in choosing her own well-being over family pressure. That decision saved everyone in this room. We toasted to healthy boundaries, genuine accountability, and family relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. After dinner, Mom and Jake prepared to leave, but the atmosphere was warm rather than awkward. "Same time next month for our family dinner," Mom asked. "Absolutely. Your place or mine?" "Mine. I want to show off my new apartment and cook for everyone." After they left, Marcus and I reflected on the remarkable transformation our family had undergone. "Do you think the changes are permanent?" he asked. "I think they're sustainable because they're based on genuine insight rather than temporary remorse." Mom understands why enabling hurt Jake instead of helping him. Jake understands why his addiction created victims beyond himself. And I understand why boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships. What's the most important thing you've learned this year? I thought about that question. I learned the difference between guilt and responsibility. I felt guilty about Jake's problems and Mom's financial struggles, so I took responsibility for solving them. But their problems weren't my responsibility, and my attempts to solve them actually prevented them from taking responsibility for their own choices. And now I take responsibility for my own choices and let them take responsibility for theirs. It's much clearer and much healthier. The birthday crisis had revealed something important about family loyalty. True loyalty means supporting people's growth and independence, not enabling their dysfunction or dependence. Setting boundaries had felt like abandoning family, but it had actually created the conditions necessary for genuine healing and healthy relationships. A year later, we were all better people living more authentic lives because we'd chosen accountability over avoidance, honesty over manipulation, and independence over codependence. The bills truly didn't pay themselves, but more importantly, problems didn't solve themselves either. Real solutions required honest assessment, appropriate boundaries, and the courage to choose long-term health over short-term peace. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where helping family or friends actually made their problems worse instead of better? It's so easy to fall into the trap of enabling destructive behavior when you're motivated by love and guilt. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to make someone else's poor choices easier. I'd love to hear your thoughts about setting boundaries with family members who expect financial support. Have you experienced pressure to sacrifice your own financial stability to help relatives who could solve their own problems with better choices? What strategies have helped you distinguish between genuine helping and enabling harmful behavior? Please like this video if you found my story helpful. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and financial boundaries. And share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar family manipulation. Your comments and engagement help other people facing these difficult decisions feel less alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that protecting your own well-being isn't selfish. It's necessary for building healthy relationships that actually help the people you love grow into better versions of themselves.